The notification that ended my life arrived with the same cheerful little chime my phone used for food deliveries. Jun's soft ding in the back of my skull, and then the words, hanging there in calm civic blue font. Citizen Chen Lei, you have been selected. Congratulations. Selected. Like I'd won a raffle. I was standing in the headmaster's office when it landed, and the headmaster was already talking, already halfway through a speech he'd clearly given 100 times to 100 other kids who'd won this exact raffle. Mandatory conscription quota. Every planet owes its sons to the war against the alien races. Jun, great and glorious honor. He kept his eyes on the desk the whole time, on a very interesting spot on the desk, because it turns out it's hard to look someone in the face while you read them their death sentence off a form. Here's the part nobody says out loud, so let me. Conscription isn't the army. Conscription is a lottery where the prize is getting shipped to the far edge of human space to plug a hole in a front line with your body. The death rate runs 20 to 30% per rotation. You don't get to come home. You don't get to call home. From the moment your name comes up, you are cut off from your planet, your family, everything, for the rest of a life that the numbers say is going to be short. And the beautiful part, the part that had a smile fighting its way onto my face right there in that office, was the compensation package. Because the system is generous. When it takes a son, it pays the family. My father would get a promotion he'd wanted for 15 years. My mother would get placed in a comfortable government post. My little sister's tuition, all the way up, covered. My whole family's happiness, wrapped in a bow, and the price printed right there on the tag, in my name. They were going to be so happy. That was the thing I kept circling back to. Somewhere across the city, my parents were about to have the best week of their lives, and it was because I'd been sold. Is there, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected, any way to decline? The headmaster finally looked up. Pity. That was the expression. Pity is what you give someone when there's nothing left to give them. So I asked the only entity in the room that would actually tell me the truth, the goddess of wisdom. Which sounds grand, and is grand, but functionally she's the civilization's assistant, the calm, ever-present voice that runs everything for everyone, absolutely fair, absolutely tireless, and she answered me the way she answers everyone, instantly and without heat. There were 3 ways off the list, she told me. Be an evolver, the superhumans, the ones who could awaken and cultivate real power. I was not one. 99% of people never awaken, and I was a very ordinary member of that 99. Be a 4th-class citizen. There were, on my entire home planet, a population in the tens of billions, a grand total of one of those, and he ran the place. Or develop a brand new evolutionary path, something the entire span of human civilization had never seen, and be elevated to 2nd-class citizen as a reward. She listed them the way you'd list the ingredients for a dish you know the person can't afford. 3 doors. Every one of them welded shut. For an ordinary man with an ordinary body and a family already spending his death benefits, all 3 might as well have been written on the moon. Thank you, I told her, because I'm polite even to the software that just confirmed I was going to die. Then I went home and ate dinner with my family and let them be happy, because what was I going to do? Ruin it. That night was when the door showed up in my head. I want to be clear that I did not do anything to summon it. I was lying in the dark, doing the thing you do the night after you learn your expiration date, which is stare at the ceiling and negotiate with a universe that isn't listening, when something in the back of my mind that had always been a blank wall simply was not a blank wall anymore. There was a gate there. Towering, ancient, wrong in the specific way that enormous old things are wrong, standing in a space inside me that had no business having room for it. And when my attention brushed against it, information unfolded in my head like it had been waiting my whole life for me to notice. Gate of Myriad Realms. And under it, a title, settling onto me like it had always been mine. Master of the Gate of Myriad Realms. I couldn't touch the thing itself. It was too big, too high, a mountain wearing the mask of a door. But the projection of it, the sliver of it that lived in my mind that I could use, and what it did was almost stupidly simple and completely insane. It could take my consciousness, my true spirit, everything that was me, and throw it into another world entirely. I'd wake up in some other body, in some other reality, and I'd stay there, and whatever I made of myself there, I could bring the important parts back. Cultivation, power, comprehension, home to a body that couldn't awaken a single spark of anything. I lay there and did the math. The conscription notice came with a grace period, but a grace period means surveillance, and surveillance means the window was closing. If I was going to gamble everything on a door in my skull, I was going to do it now, tonight, before some very polite officer came to escort me to my glorious honor. I looked at the gate, in whatever way a gate can, looked back. Fine, I said to the dark. Let's go somewhere the death rate's better. And the gate opened, and the suction took me, and I fell out of my life and into somebody else's. I woke up 3 years old. Now, before you say anything, yes, this is a lot to process at any age, but it is a particularly weird thing to process while a monk twice your height is trying to teach you to hold a broom. I was a novice, a tiny bald child in tiny gray robes in a place called the Great Zen Temple, and the memories of the body's toddler brain and my own adult mind sloshed together until I got my footing. The gate had picked the destination. I just had to survive it. Two things dropped into my head on arrival, quiet as receipts. Jun's stay of 20 years in this world, and a talent, bound to me for the trip. The gate's gift for the crossing. Heaven-defying comprehension. I didn't know what it did. So I did what any reasonable 3-year-old would do, which is I sat in the temple courtyard and stared at a sparrow. The sparrow hopped, flitted, did a little tilting dodge off the wellstone that I couldn't have described a second before, and then, without any warning, I could describe it perfectly, more than describe it. I understood it, root and branch, the whole logic of the movement, and it arrived in my mind not as a sparrow's clumsy hop, but as a finished, named, superior technique. Divine sparrow soaring, Jun movement art, complete. I watched an earthworm push through the dirt after rain and got a tunneling method out of it. Earth dragon turning over. I watched the older monks in the yard grind through their morning forms, their Arhat fist, the temple's own martial art, passed down for centuries, and I didn't just learn it. I looked at it and saw where it was clumsy, saw the 200 better versions of it that the founders had never reached, and the finished thing bloomed in my head fully formed. Great Arhat Buddha fist, not the temple's art. The art the temple had been trying and failing to be for 800 years. That was the talent. That was the whole terrifying shape of it. I didn't copy things. I looked at anything, a bird, a worm, a fist, a philosophy, and my mind ran it forward to its perfect conclusion and handed me the peak. The trouble with a 3-year-old accidentally performing the perfected form of the temple's own martial art in an open courtyard is that people notice. Specifically, the abbot noticed a serene old man named Mingju who came to a full stop mid-stride when he saw what my little arms were doing and stood there for a while making the face of a man watching water flow uphill. They tested me, of course. 7 elder monks and the one old master the temple had who actually raided, a long-browed ancient who was their only grandmaster, all of them gathered to watch a toddler throw punches. I showed them the Buddha fist. What I didn't tell them, because I didn't fully understand it yet myself, was that in learning it, I'd tripped and fallen straight through a wall other people spent decades climbing. The art needed innate chi to run, so my body had, without asking me, refined innate chi and produced it. I'd skipped the entire foundation of martial arts, the acquired realm, the years of it, and landed in the innate realm before I was old enough to reliably use a spoon. The long-browed old monk took me as his disciple on the spot. He was a kind man. I want that on the record because of how the next part sounds. It took him 2 months to give up. Not out of frustration, out of honesty. He'd teach me a form, and I'd watch him do it once and then do a better version, and he'd nod slowly and go quiet, and finally one afternoon he set down his tea and told me, with enormous dignity, that a teacher who has nothing left to teach should have the decency to get out of the way. He sent me to the scripture pavilion, the library, the place with all the books. That was a mistake, though nobody could have known it. Giving me a library was like handing a fire a warehouse of dry paper and asking it to please be reasonable. I read the Yi Jin Jing, the temple's great body-tempering classic, and comprehended straight past it into a version that tempered the spirit too. I reached Grandmaster in about 4 years, which I'd love to tell you was hard, but it was mostly a matter of reading fast. By the time I was 5, I was studying the path to Great Grandmaster, the tier above, the one the whole temple had exactly one living example of, and I found out why. The breakthrough method had a 96% death rate. 96. You didn't cultivate to Great Grandmaster so much as you played Russian roulette with almost all the chambers loaded. So I sat down and, using the thing in my head, invented 163 different ways to not die doing it, picked the best one, and broke through at 8. The shockwave of it rolled across the whole temple, an exotic pressure that snapped every elder's head up at once, and when they came running they found an 8-year-old sitting cross-legged in the pavilion having just done the impossible thing that their one grandmaster had barely survived. There is a particular silence a room full of holy men makes when their entire understanding of the world quietly dies. I got very familiar with that silence. By then they'd started calling me the Buddha's disciple, living Buddha in the whispers. I'd comprehended a scripture into a spiritual field skill that let me strike at the mind itself, heaven-shattering earth-striking, and I'd taken my old long-browed master aside and taught him a spirit-tempering trick that put 15 years back into his life, which was the moment he stopped looking at me like a prodigy and started looking at me like something the sutras had warned him about. 5 more years, and I broke a ceiling that had no door in it. The Great Grandmaster tier was supposed to be the top, the end of the road, the place the road ran out, and I stood at the end of it, looked at the blank wall of it, and did the thing my whole existence was apparently for. I built a new floor above the top floor, Jun realm that had never existed, that no one in the history of this world had touched, where mental force could reach out and move matter without a hand, where a single strand of my power outweighed 10 strands of a grandmaster's. I needed a name for it. I called it the mythical realm because I have a flair for the dramatic and no one was around to stop me. And then I left the temple because a person can only stare at the same sutras for so long, and because I'd realized something about my own gift that changed the whole game. My comprehension fed on variety. One temple, however holy, had one flavor of martial arts. If I wanted to keep climbing, I needed everything. Every style, every school, every backwater sword form some old man had spent his life on. I needed the whole world's martial arts poured into me, and I knew exactly where a copy of all of them happened to be sitting in one building, the capital of Dali. Its ruling ancestor, a great grandmaster in his own right, had spent a lifetime forcibly collecting a copy of every sect's manual into the palace martial hall. He'd robbed my own temple for some of them years back, which is a detail I want you to hold on to. I went to the capital. On the way, I passed a tea house where a storyteller was already spinning the legend of the Buddha's son of the great Zen temple to a rapt crowd, getting maybe 40% of it right, and a middle-aged Zen monk in the street took one look at my face and went pale, because apparently there were portraits. When I reached the capital, that same monk found me and proposed a plan. An elaborate, careful 6-month plan involving the Empress Dowager and a delicate series of favors to get me quietly invited into the palace martial hall like a civilized person. I looked at the plan. I looked at the palace, which I could see from where we stood, all 8,000 guards and 5 grandmasters of it. That's a lot of trouble, I said, and I used the lion's roar. It's a sound technique, one of the temple's 72 arts, comprehended up to something the founders would not have recognized. I stood outside the palace wall and I shouted once, and the shout went through the palace like a tide going through a sandcastle. 8,000 guards' minds scattered like startled birds. The innate tier commanders bled from all 7 orifices. 5 grandmasters braced and could not brace hard enough. Not a single person died. I made very sure of that. I just wanted them to know that the door had, in every sense that mattered, already opened. Inside, the emperor and a gaunt old royal grandmaster named Ouyang Feng were still finding their feet when I walked in. The emperor looked at me, looked at the ringing silence where his palace's defenses used to be. And then this man, this ruler of a nation, bowed and personally escorted me into the martial hall like a valet showing a guest to the good room. "Great master," he managed, "if you wish to enter, you had only to say." I did say, I told him. You had a 6-month plan. The world lost its mind over that one for a while, the mysterious monk who cracked the Dali palace like an egg. I spent 6 months in the martial hall inhaling every manual in it, and here's the humbling part. It still wasn't enough to break my next ceiling. Perfect manuals from famous masters all pointed the same handful of directions. What I was starving for was difference, wrongness. The weird, clumsy, self-taught styles of ordinary fighters, each one a slightly different wrong turn that might, comprehended, show me a road the geniuses had all missed. So I announced a tournament, Jun World Martial Arts Tournament, and I baited it perfectly. Top 10 finishers got to walk out with 3 superior arts of their choosing, free, straight from me. Any grandmaster who showed up got a spiritual art as a gift, or a fight with me if they preferred. Free top-tier power from the monk who'd humbled a palace. The world went feral. They came from everywhere, and every single one of them came carrying exactly the buffet of difference I needed. One of them was the Sword Saint of the South Sea, a half-step great grandmaster who arrived intending to use me as a stepping stone to fame. He was very good. He challenged me in the hall in front of everyone, and I want to be fair to him, he was genuinely world-class good, and I dismantled him in about half the time it takes an incense stick to burn. Afterward, he sat with his teenage disciple, who was looking at me with a hatred born of humiliation, and he corrected the boy gently. "You look at him," he said, "as a frog at the bottom of a well looks up at the moon. I look at him as a mayfly looks up at the sky." Then he bowed to me sincerely and left to go get stronger. The tournament gave me what I needed. Somewhere in the mess of 1,000 ordinary fighters' ordinary styles, I found the crack in the ceiling. I created a few more arts along the way because I couldn't help it, and I locked onto the path past the mythical realm. Then I went home, back to the mountain, back to the temple, where the elders had spent the whole time worrying that fame at the age of 10 would rot my mind. "Everything's settled," I told them, and retreated to the scripture pavilion and let the world flock to the foot of the mountain to catch a glimpse of the boy monk they now knew by his temple name, while I got on with the actual work. 8 years passed like that. The Sword Saint came back once, a full great grandmaster now and thoroughly humble, and I finally cracked the ceiling above mythical and named the tier beyond it the carefree realm, where you fuse your blood and spirit and start to feel the actual breathing of heaven and earth. And I did one thing before I left that I'm quietly proud of. I sat down and wrote out dozens of books, the whole road, acquired to past mythical, every step I'd bootlegged, and left them in the pavilion. So the next impossible kid this temple produced wouldn't have to invent the stairs. Then heaven and earth started leaning on me. I don't have a better way to say it. It was a pressure, vast and impersonal. The feeling of a world deciding you've overstayed, that your ceiling has risen above its ceiling and you no longer fit inside its rules. It wasn't malice. It was more like being politely, cosmically, evicted. I let it take me. And I woke up back in my own bed, in my own weak, unawakened 20-something body, in a world with a war and a conscription notice and a family spending my death benefits. 10 minutes had passed. 20 years there. 10 minutes here. Higher world runs slower, the gate informed me, unfolding a few more of its secrets now that I'd made a round trip. And 2 of those secrets stopped my breath. 1, I could make the crossing with my physical body next time if I wanted, though dying over there in the flesh would mean actually dying, and it would cost more. 2, and this was the one that mattered, my cultivation had come home with me. I could feel it, innate chi condensing in the dantian of my real, ordinary, supposedly hopeless body. 20 years of impossible growth, folded down and carried across, blooming quietly in the flesh that couldn't awaken a spark, except now it had. I was an evolver. I had a martial path no one in this universe had ever seen, and it was already mine, already in my body, already real. I sat up in the dark and started laughing, and I probably would have kept going for a while, except my bedroom door creaked open and a very small person padded in, my sister, 6 years old, holding, in both hands, with the gravity of a diplomat carrying a treaty, a slice of cake. Her favorite cake, the fancy kind, the kind that had started appearing in our house exactly as often as the guilt did. Our parents had been buying her things. They'd been buying everyone things. That's what the money does. It shows up early, before the sun does the dying, and it makes the house very sweet and very hard to be in. She held the cake up to me like an offering. For you, she said, because you're going away. And I, a man who had just spent 20 subjective years becoming a living legend, who had cracked a palace with a single shout, looked at my baby sister's most precious possession and, entirely on instinct, ate it. The whole slice, one bite. The betrayal on her face is a thing I will carry to whatever grave I eventually earn. Her lip trembled, her eyes filled. How could you? She whispered, and then, at volume, how could you eat all of it? And dissolved into tears while I sat there holding an empty plate and my dignity in roughly equal, roughly 0 amounts. I bought her a bigger cake the next day. It did not fully repair the relationship. Some wounds are cake deep, but it clarified things. The conscription was still real. The clock was still running. And I now had, folded into my ordinary body, the one thing on the goddess's impossible list. Jun brand new evolutionary path. So I refined it, took the whole martial road I'd built in that other world and reshaped it into something this universe could use, a martial scripture, and I uploaded it anonymously to the goddess of wisdom, the way any citizen can submit a discovery, and I sat back to see what a bored civilization AI made of it. She did not stay bored. The preliminary read came back fast. Genuine, first of its kind, extremely widespread potential. And then something happened that, I would later learn, essentially never happens. The routine evaluation escalated. Junmane consciousness of the goddess engaged with it directly, with something that read unmistakably as actual emotion, and it tripped a contingency written into the civilization's founding charter, and it did the one thing the system reserves for genuinely historic events. It woke up the governor. Governor Gao Sheng was the single 4th-class citizen on our planet of 50 billion people, and he was, at that moment, taking the 2 hours of personal rest he was allotted per day, and the goddess pulled him out of it. She showed him a new evolutionary path, potential tier 3. Ranked on the Kanglin evolution ranking, the 100 greatest paths our world had produced in 820,000 years, a monument that had not so much as flickered in 560 years, at number 93. Number 93. On the first try, from an anonymous nobody, the governor approved a reward of 2,000 merit points for the developer, which the goddess noted was unusual, given that a normal tier 3 path earned 800 to 1,000, and then he sat in his interrupted rest and stared at the wall for a while. 2,000 merit points arrived in my account. I spent 1,000 of them and became a second-class citizen. There are fewer than 1 in 100,000 of those on the planet. And more to the point, a second-class citizen cannot be conscripted, can simply decline. The death sentence didn't get commuted or appealed or fought. It just stopped applying to me, quietly, the way a rule stops applying when you've climbed above the line it's drawn at. The congratulations came with a 5 million transfer, enough for a family of 4 to live 200 years, and a stack of privileges I'd unpack later. I bought advanced nutrient solution by the case and started rebuilding my real body toward the strength my path said it should have, and the next day I went home and told my parents the truth, or a truth The awakening type evolver version of the truth, the one that didn't involve a door in my head. I dusted a ceramic bowl on the far side of the room without touching it, just to watch their faces. The conscription's void, I told them. I'm off the list, and my mother burst into tears, and my father sat down hard, and within about 90 seconds the two of them were bickering, actually bickering, about whose side of the family the evolver blood must have come from, and I sat there in the warm wreck of my parents' relief and thought, this is the thing I was never going to trade away. Not for anyone's promotion, not for anyone's tuition. This. Out in the wider world, meanwhile, the monument had moved. In the virtual world, the perfect civilization-wide simulation where everyone actually lived half their lives, the Kanglin evolution ranking stood in the central plaza as an enormous monument, and for the first time in 560 years, it changed. The path ranked 100th. Some old blood cultivation method got quietly bumped off the bottom, and a new name slid into place at 93, Martial Dao Path. The plaza erupted, and every faction, every academy, every ambitious evolver on the planet started tearing the world apart, trying to find out who the anonymous developer was. They did not find me. I'd made sure of that. What they found instead, over the following weeks, was a series of small, satisfying collisions, and since this is the part where the universe started paying me back with interest, let me give you the highlights. I bought a house. Jun suburban mansion really, in a good community, with an underground training room at the 50% discount second-class citizens get, and while I was signing for it in my deliberately shabby clothes, a former classmate of mine happened to be standing in that sales office. Chin Mei Li, watching the branch manager himself abandon his desk to come and personally, sweatily grovel at the shabby man buying the discounted mansion, and you could see her brain refusing to reconcile the two facts. Then there was the reunion. An old friend of mine, Wei Bo, the genuinely decent one, had organized it, and I went, and for a lovely half hour, my classmates got to pity me. Poor Chen Lei, conscripted, off to die. One of them, Zhou Xiaomei, whose family had military connections, generously promised to pull strings and get me off the list. Another, Gao Yuhan, whose family had money, kindly offered me a job so I could enjoy my remaining time. Chin Mei Li sat there knowing what she'd seen at the sales office and not knowing how to say it. And then a government hover car landed outside the coffee shop, an Evolver Association car, and came to collect me for my registration, and the table went very quiet. Yang and Gao, recovering, tried to pull up my public information to figure out what was going on, the way powerful families do, and the goddess of wisdom herself intervened to inform them that further unauthorized inquiry into that citizen would be referred to the Supreme Court. They stopped inquiring. They stopped, honestly, doing much of anything for a few minutes, sitting there with the specific terror of people who've just realized they threw a rock at something enormous in the dark. The registration itself was almost funny. The Evolver Association tested you in a virtual world cabin against sand golem opponents tier by tier, and I went through all 12 stages of Tier 1 in the space of a few breaths, which the association president, a man named Tang, informed me had never once happened on a first registration in the history of the branch. Then I tried Tier 2, lost in 3 moves because my real body hadn't caught up to my understanding yet, and while I was losing, I comprehended the entire Tier 2 path and filed it away for a breakthrough in about 5 years. President Tang watched all of this and underwent a rapid, total conversion from official to disciple, and by the end, was asking me to please just call him Brother Tang. The ripples kept spreading. Gao Yuhan's grandfather, the founder of the whole Gao group, and Zhou Xiaomei's uncle, a military colonel, both independently concluded from the goddess's blocked information warning that their children had insulted someone genuinely important, and both resolved to personally deliver their kids to my door to apologize. They caught up with me at a family banquet, which is its own comedy. My relatives had gathered to celebrate the son who beat conscription, and the gathering had that specific texture of family gatherings where everyone's affection is doing math in the background. Jun Braggart cousin offered me a fake job at a fake salary from a company I could see, using my new citizen privileges, was quietly bankrupt. June Bureau Secretary uncle offered me a genuinely coveted academy spot. His spiteful son sneered at me and got scolded for it. And then, one after another, like a door opening onto weather, the tycoon arrived to apologize with a gift, and the military colonel arrived, and finally President Tang himself arrived, and my relatives' careful, jealous arithmetic simply stopped computing and resolved into slack-jawed awe. Brother Tang took me aside at the end of it and asked, almost shyly, whether I would consider representing our city in next year's Kanglin Star Arena tournament. 50 million to anyone who placed in the top 5,000. Our city always came dead last. I thought about the 50 million, which was a great deal of nutrient solution, and about how much I'd need it. I'll think about it, I said. 6 months went by. I uploaded the higher chapters of my path, the mythical and carefree stages, and got 3,000 more merit points, which put me at 5,000 total, and pushed my path up the monument from 93rd to 78th, and set the plaza buzzing all over again. I banked 4,000 of the merit toward third-class citizenship, which took 5,000, and I bought, through Brother Tang, a military-grade nutrient tank rated to keep a body alive and healthy for 200 years, because I was about to leave that body untended for a while, and I am not careless with the things I love. The gate's edge had gone fully bright, recharged. The second trip was ready. I lay down in the tank, in the dark, in the quiet hum of a machine that would hold my life for me while I was away, and I looked at the door in my head, and the door looked back. Again, I said, and it opened. This time I woke up as a baby, and the first thing the world did was try to kill my family. I want to explain how the gate works, because it matters. It doesn't ask where you'd like to go, it picks. And it seemed to enjoy dropping me in younger every trip, a toddler monk last time, and this time a newborn, blind and boneless and screaming, in a fortified manor called the Zhou family fort on the night it burned. My father in this life was Zhou Hao, one of the finest martial artists in the wandering world, and my mother was Mei Chen, and they were, for the roughly 4 hours I got to know them, good people. The people trying to kill them were the Wanmo sect, the 10,000 demons. 8 of their leaders and a hidden protector had come in the dark, and my father was very strong, and it was not nearly enough, and I lay in my mother's arms as an infant with an adult mind and could do exactly nothing. Zhou Hao got a mortal wound and used the time it bought to open a secret tunnel in the wall. He pressed a jade pendant into my swaddling, carved with 2 words, my name, Mountain Peak, Jian. He pushed my mother and me through the gap, and the last thing he said to his son, this dying man, bleeding out to buy us 30 seconds, was not go get strong or avenge me. It was don't ever avenge me, live. I have thought about that a great deal. The tunnel wasn't far enough. Pursuers ran my mother down 2 days later, and she died the way she'd lived those last hours, with her body between me and the blades, and then I was alone. An infant, in the wilderness, with a wolf circling, and the smell of milk on me like a dinner bell. Here's the thing my gift is actually for, not palaces. This. I lay in the leaf litter and looked at the dead branches around me and comprehended the way dead wood simply is, the way it doesn't breathe or want or fear, and I made my own tiny body do it, dead wood breathing. I hid my scent and my aura and my heat inside the logic of a fallen log, and I comprehended the sleep of things that sleep through winter, hibernation breathing, and I went so still and so cold and so nothing that the wolf sniffed a dead branch that happened to be shaped like a baby and moved on. 2 days I did that, Jun newborn, running 2 comprehended breathing arts on pure will, keeping myself alive by convincing the world I wasn't there, and on the second day a Taoist found me. His name was Dioxin. He'd been my father's sworn brother, come from a place called Longhu Mountain to help, delayed on the road by a Wanmo ambush that had cost him time my parents didn't have. He found the fort a grave, and followed a father's instinct and a son's jade pendant into the wilderness, and he found a silent, half-frozen baby who should have been dead, and he poured his own true key into me and wept, and he took me home to the mountain, Longhu Mountain, the Celestial Master's mansion. Jun Taoist holy ground 6,800 years old that enshrined a true martial emperor and had, at its head, an old immortal named Xuanji. Xuanji took one look at the orphan Dioxin had carried up the mountain and gave me a name, Zhou Jian, keeping the mountain in it, and the mansion raised me on breast milk begged door to door from the village below. I mention that because it's easy to make these worlds sound like a game, and 100 women I never met kept me alive 1 cup at a time, and I try not to forget them. The gate's gift this time was unparalleled comprehension, its own flavor of the same terrible talent, and a stay of 80 years. And this world's ladder went higher than the last. Ranks 9 down to 1, then the Celestial Phenomenon Realm, and then, above even that, the Celestial Master. The mansion hadn't produced a Celestial Master in 500 years. I hit the Celestial Phenomenon Realm in secret in about 5 years, and then, for the first time in any world, I got genuinely stuck. The next step would take 50 more years the ordinary way, and there wasn't an ordinary way past it that I could find. But there was a scruffy vagrant who hung around the mansion, a filthy wine-soaked old man that everyone tolerated and no one respected, who was in fact a Celestial Realm Master named Pingyang hiding in plain sight, and who had, I eventually learned, secretly cleansed my infant marrow the night I arrived. He gave me exactly one hint. Perform well, he said, at the Sword Tomb. It's in 2 weeks. It only happens once every 20 years. The Sword Tomb held the true martial sword, and the true martial sword chose the next Celestial Master. That was the whole engine of the mansion, and it had been silent for 5 centuries. Hundreds of young Taoist disciples gathered for the trip, and they were handed a mind-sensing method to help them commune with the lesser blades, and I comprehended that little method into something called Supreme Sword Control Sensing before we finished walking in, because I cannot help myself. The other disciples picked minor swords, respectful, careful, taking what was offered. I walked past all of them, deeper than anyone goes, to the blade at the heart of the tomb, and I drew the true martial sword out of its 500-year sleep. The whole mountain shook. Across the world, hidden celestial realm experts, a golden-eyed man on distant ice plains, a Taoist begging on a street corner, an ancient thing buried in the earth, all of them felt it at once and turned their heads. Back at the mansion, old men who had waited their entire lives for this wept openly. I was named the future celestial master, and I hadn't even reached the tier yet. And then the sword told me its secret, and the secret was a problem. Inside the true martial sword lived two powers: Tai-Yin, the moon; Tai-Yang, the sun. Together they were the great Tao that led past celestial phenomenon and into the celestial master's realm. But every past master had walked one of them, one path, sun or moon, never both, because the one master in the mansion's history who tried to fuse them, the third, had detonated, died in a way they still spoke of in low voices. I looked at the two powers with the thing in my head, and the thing in my head told me, plainly, that fusing them was the true higher road, and one path was a fraction of what both could be. I decided to cultivate both. Master Xuanji found out and came apart. This gentle old immortal who had raised me stood in front of me shaking, telling me about the third master, telling me I was going to die, and when telling didn't work, he offered to spend his own remaining life force, 10 years of tempering my body by hand, to burn the sun influence out of me and reset me onto the safe single path. He offered to trade his life to save mine from a choice he thought was suicide. I refused. Gently, but I refused, because heaven-defying comprehension is not a hunch, it's a certainty, and because, and this is the cold true thing under all of it, dying here wouldn't kill my real body. I had infinite tries. Xuanji had one life and one heartbroken hope, and I couldn't explain to him why I could throw myself at the thing that had killed the third master and simply keep the answer if I survived and not lose anything real if I didn't. So he gave up on me. He thought I was choosing a beautiful death out of arrogance. It was one of the few times a world's kindness has actually hurt to walk away from. The 4 young Taoist attendants who served the repository, especially a thin, earnest one named Manhwa, watched me with worry instead of the mockery I half expected. And Daoxin, the man who'd carried me off the mountain, came to see me, and I braced for another plea. He didn't plead. He told me the one thing that reached me. Your real father, he said, Zhou Hao, at the end, holding you, his only wish for you was that you'd live happily. Not that you'd be great, that you'd be happy. I sat with that for a long time. Then I told them all that I was going to do the thing the ancients hadn't dared and later generations couldn't, and I went to fuse the sun and the moon. It took 8 years. 8 years of holding two opposite deaths in my dantian and refusing to let either one win, black and white circling each other, closer and closer, while I got old enough to shave. And in those 8 years, the villain the whole trip had been quietly building finally rose. The Wanmo sect, the 10,000 demons, the ones who'd burned my family's fort 18 years earlier. They'd been growing for 2 decades, and 5 years back, their sect master had gotten his hands on the original demon sect legacy, the inheritance of the ancient enemy the first celestial master had fought, the primordial demon lord's own art. With no new celestial master in 500 years, the demonic path had run unchecked, and my small personal grave grudge and the whole world's slow-rising catastrophe turned out to be the same story, which is how these things usually go. They came for Longhu Mountain. The sect master and 9 celestial phenomenon deputies and 43 protectors and a river of demons, and when the mansion's Xuanji saw how confident the sect master was, he was afraid, because confidence like that means someone knows something you don't. What he knew was that the demonic legacy had pushed him half a step past celestial phenomenon, past anything the mansion could field. 2 things happened at once. Out in the world, Daoxin, my adoptive father, had been hunting the shadow serpent, the specific leader who'd led the massacre at the Zhou family fort, and he was ambushed and left comatose, devil qi rotting his lungs, past what even celestial phenomenon healing could touch. They brought him back, dying. I looked at him, at the poison eating the man who'd wept over my frozen infant body, and I said, it's nothing serious, and I meant it, and I promised to fix him the moment I finished, and then I went back to holding the sun and the moon apart while my master fought for his life on the mountaintop. Xuanji took up a celestial master's sword and met the Wanmo sect master, and it wasn't enough. The demonic power ground him down. The sect master got him on his knees, raised the killing blow, and that was the moment, the exact moment, with the whole mountain about to fall, that the two powers in my Dantian finally, after 8 years, agreed to become one thing. I transcended, Celestial Master. I sent the true martial sword screaming down the mountain to knock the killing blow out of the sect master's hand, and then I walked out of the repository and down the sea of clouds on my own 2 feet, walking on cloud like the world was floor, and every living person on that mountain, righteous and demonic alike, went to their knees, because that is what bodies do when something walks toward them that the world has no rule for. The sect master ran. I let him get exactly far enough to hope, and then I closed a Gangsheng field around him, a Wenqi millstone the size of a valley, and I ground him and 5 of the 6 escape shadows he tried to split into out of existence. And then I drew the sword once, and the stroke cut 7 celestial phenomenon deputies in half, and ended 99% of a demon army in a single line of light. I hadn't killed anyone in the last world. I made up for it here. I'm not going to pretend it troubled me. They'd earned every inch of that stroke 18 years before I was born into it. I was the 37th Celestial Master, the first in 500 years, and by the mansion's own trembling reckoning, likely the strongest who had ever lived, stronger than the first, because I'd walked the road 2 masters wide. I named the fused path Wenqi, Sun and Moon, and I resolved to carve it into my own Celestial Master's sword someday for whatever worthy soul came after me. Xuanji knelt in front of me, wrecked with guilt for having given up on me, and I lifted him up because what was there to forgive? He'd offered me his life. Then I went to Daoxin's sickbed and let the Wenqi power dissolve the devil key out of his lungs in the space of a few breaths. The poison that no healer in the world could touch gone like breath off a mirror, and the old man wept and spoke to the memory of my dead father, told Zhou Hao that his son had become an invincible celestial master, and I stood there and let that be true, even though the son Zhou Hao made had died in a fort fire, and I was the thing that woke up in his crib. My strength in that world settled at the level of a second-tier evolver back home, near the top of it, and my lifespan doubled to 500 years, and I had about 60 years left on the trip. I took my Celestial Master's sword to a smith and had 3 mountain peaks engraved on the blade. My father, my mother, and me. Mountain peak. 3 of us, together, on one edge, since we'd never gotten to be together anywhere else. And then I went down the mountain to do the one thing my birth father had forbidden, and I hope he'd have forgiven me, because I didn't do it for revenge in the end. I did it because the demonic path was a farm that ran on devouring living souls, and someone with the power to end it and the will to should. So I ended it. I stormed the Wanmo sect's headquarters, walked through their mechanical soul traps like cobwebs, killed the last deputy, and then the sect master's personal disciple, the one who'd learned the method for mass-producing celestial phenomenon experts out of stolen life. He'd run to the Dayu dynasty and begged them to shelter him, and they'd looked at the situation and told him, with real regret, that Celestial Master Zhou was invincible and they would not be dying on his behalf, and a swordlight took him mid-plea. The one man in the world who might have restrained me, a golden-eyed lord of the northern ice plains from some ancient lineage, chose not to shelter a fleeing original demon remnant when I came for it, and I killed the remnant and spared the lord, who stood in the wave of my presence and understood exactly how close the choice had run. They started calling it the Jiazi year of slaying demons. It took 60 years, and by the end the demonic path was simply gone from the world, except the root. 60 years in, I finally pinned down the original demon sect ruins, a place that moved so it couldn't be found, the source the first celestial master had failed to destroy 6,800 years ago. And at its heart was the original demonic spirit, a blood-red thing on a blood-red altar, something that had come down from an upper realm, immortal as long as blood Kwai existed anywhere, the seed that had grown every demon uprising in the world's history. It told me, almost bored, that more than 20 celestial masters had tried to kill it, the first among them, and everyone had failed. I didn't kill it. Not right away. I spent months standing in front of the thing that had beaten 20 of my predecessors, and I drained it. Comprehended its entire celestial master-grade demonic legacy out of it, every technique, every rule it knew, because power is neither good nor evil, and it would be a waste to burn a library just because it belonged to a monster. And when I'd taken everything it had, I crushed it with the Gangsheng millstone, and the source of the world's demons stopped existing. Then I went home to the mountain, and the mountain was old. Xuanji was long dead. Pingyang, the drunk who'd cleansed my marrow, long dead. Lianhua, the thin, earnest attendant, was an old man now, running the mansion. 60 years is 60 years, even for me, even when I don't feel it the way they do. So I did the last thing I could do for the place that had raised me on begged milk. I found an orphan named Yu An, and I forced the true martial sword to accept him, and I made the mansion a second celestial master, so the golden age wouldn't die when I left. And then, before the trip ended, I walked to the quiet cemetery at the rebuilt Zhou family fort, and I stood at 2 graves under 2 names I'd read off a jade pendant, Zhou Hao and Mei Chen, the parents I'd had for 4 hours, and I told them their son had lived, happily even, mostly, as much as a man can who keeps waking up in other people's cradles. The 80 years ran out, my body dissolved, I went home. 80 years, and I opened my eyes in the nutrient tank 2 hours and 3 minutes later. The time dilation is different for every world, it turns out. The higher and grander the world, the slower its clock runs against mine. 20 years for 10 minutes the first trip, 80 years for 2 hours this one. I lay in the humming dark of the tank doing the arithmetic and feeling the new weight in my chest because I hadn't come back empty. My real body sat now at the 2nd tier, near the top of it, a hair from the 3rd, and folded into my dantian was the Wenqi path, the fused sun and moon, and heaven-defying comprehension confirmed for me what 8 years of not dying had suggested. This was my Tao, not one I'd stumbled into, the right one, the one that would carry me all the way up. Which meant it was time to make some money because the next rung of the ladder ran on rare stellar materials, and those do not come cheap. I uploaded the new chapters to the Goddess of Wisdom, the Celestial Phenomena chapter, and the Gangsheng chapter, and I want you to remember how the last upload went, the quiet 93rd place, the mildly interested AI. This time the goddess read my path, detected the fusion of 2 extreme powers at its core, and her estimate of its ceiling did not go up a notch. It went from Tier 3 to Tier 6. Tier 6. Star falling. The realm where a person shatters stars and crosses the vacuum between worlds in their own body. Jun sealing that, at full potential, this path had a real and calculable chance of reaching. The number was so far outside normal that it tripped the founding charter again, and this time it didn't just wake up the governor, it convened all 3 goddesses, wisdom, justice, and freedom. The 3 ultimate intelligences that ran the whole of human civilization turned their attention as one onto a single anonymous evolutionary path and jointly confirmed the assessment, and poor Governor Gao Sheng, the one 4th-class citizen on a planet of 50 billion, got to sit in a room while all 3 of them agreed that something historic had happened on his watch. They valued the discovery at 20,000 merit points. Gao Sheng, in his own estimation, could not have earned 20,000 merit points in 1,000 years of trying. 20,000 landed in my account, and I want to walk you through what I did with it, because this is the part of my life that I find genuinely funny. I spent 5,000 to become a 3rd-class citizen. And the moment the rank ticked over, a hidden perk fired that nobody had mentioned. The central bank automatically repaid every loan I held, wiped them. And then, because a 3rd-class citizen is more creditworthy, handed me a fresh, interest-free credit line of 100 million, plus a 10 million welcome gift for the promotion. So the reward for developing the path was 20,000 merit points, and the reward for spending some of those points was that the bank paid off my debts and gave me 110 million to play with. The system is generous. I keep saying it. It just keeps being true. I spent the money on Sheng liquid, drawn from the hearts of dying stars, and Gang marrow, mined out of frozen dead worlds at the black edge of alien space, and I drank the 2 of them the way you'd drink medicine you paid a fortune for, and in 2 days my real body was fully restored to its 2nd tier limit, and the monument in the plaza moved again. Number 93 had become number 78, and now, overnight, 78 vanished and reappeared at number 8. Knocking a legendary Titan path down to 11th, and the whole planet lost its collective mind. You have to understand what that ranking is. The 100 paths on the Kanglin evolution ranking are the 100 strongest factions on the planet. Each name is an army, and here was an anonymous ghost who'd walked in from nowhere and taken 8th place, which meant that whoever this person was, they could raise a legion with a single sentence, and nobody knew their face. Junyang heiress named Si Hua was standing in front of the monument when it happened, and simply stopped functioning for a while, and she wasn't alone. 10,000 private messages piled up in my virtual world inbox inside a day. People wanting to recruit me. People wanting to worship me. People offering me obscene sums for a few hours of tutoring, one of them dangling 10 million for 3. I ignored the recruiters and the worshippers, was mildly tempted by the tutoring, and revealed my identity to precisely no one, because a person under 20 who'd built a path with tier 6 potential wasn't a celebrity. He was an assassination target for every alien race that could reach him, and the goddess of wisdom, when I asked, agreed completely. I did tell one family though. I moved my parents into a mansion, and one night, while they slept, I remade them. Changed their tendons, cleansed their marrow, the real thing. Better than any gene potion because it left their own potential open instead of burning it out, and they woke up evolvers. My father stood in the kitchen the next morning, flexing a hand that had never held power in 50 years, and said quietly, "Sons are supposed to rely on their fathers." When did it turn the other way around? I told my little sister she'd have to wait a few years. She was still growing, and she accepted this with the profound injustice of a child who has been told to wait for anything. Then I went shopping for shortcuts. I bought, on credit, the Primal Force Evolution Path, a genuine Tier 5 path that some long-ago genius had built around an all-encompassing energy, 40 million for a copy, and I did not cultivate it. I comprehended it, read it, understood it to its root, and folded the useful part straight into my wenchi and completed its entire body-tempering foundation in 8 hours, a process the original path allotted decades for. That pushed me to the doorstep of the 3rd tier. And it taught me a lesson I'd use for the rest of my life. Buying a finished path and eating it was faster than reinventing the wheel from Starlight. And then President Tang called, practically vibrating, because it was almost time for the arena. I said yes to the tournament for the loot. That's the honest reason. Placing in the top 3,000 meant real rewards, spirit objects, and evolution paths, and alien treasures. And every opponent I fought was a path I could comprehend for free at close range. My 3 teammates for Dongning City were introduced to me in a training hall, and the introduction did not go smoothly for them. Zhong Wen was the strongest, a telepathic sorcerer, combat power around 1098. Cao Rong was the cocky one, around 1003, and he wore a pair of Black Crow Star combat power glasses, the kind that read an opponent's strength off their aura. Hua Shiguang had a bloodline path and had been stuck at the same wall for 10 years. Cao Rong was told to test the newcomer. He pushed his glasses up his nose and looked at me, and I watched the readout climb across the little lenses. 2,000. He frowned. 3,000. He leaned in. 5,000. His mouth opened. 9,000. And then the glasses made a small apologetic pop and died on his face, wisps of smoke curling up past his eyebrows, because they simply were not built to measure a true 2nd-tier evolver and had chosen to retire rather than try. Zhong Wen converted first, instantly, the way survivors do, and produced a bottle of Tianji wine he'd apparently been hoarding for a special occasion, 500,000 a cup, extends your life, and poured it like water. By the end of the week, all 3 of them had quietly resolved, in the immortal phrase, to hug my thigh, and I let them, because loyal teammates who know their place are useful, and because I'd already read all 3 of their paths anyway and knew exactly how to make them win. The arena was an alliance-wide spectacle, broadcast to the whole star system, and Dongning City had the honor of drawing our nightmare rival in the first round, Bauhinia City, whose captain walked a giant path and was nudging the 2nd tier himself. My family watched from home. My sister screamed herself hoarse cheering. My spiteful cousin Chen Yan was competing for a different city, still nursing his lifelong ambition to somehow, someday surpass me. The commentators spent the pre-match cheerfully explaining why Dongning's unknown rookie was about to get his teammates killed. I told my 3 to charge the 4 of them head-on, suicidally, insultingly head-on. And as they charged and the Bauhinia team braced to swat them, I laid my Wenqi field over the entire arena, a domain. The kind of area suppression power that isn't supposed to exist below the 4th or 5th tier, and every giant team evolver on that floor abruptly found themselves moving at 10 or 20% of their strength, wading through mud, while my 3 ordinary teammates walked up and won a fight they had no business surviving, and while it happened I stood in the middle of my own domain and comprehended all 4 enemy paths at my leisure. The host stopped narrating. Jun newcomer with a domain. The crowd made a sound I've come to enjoy. We did that for 2 months. I won every individual bout by the narrowest, most theatrical margin I could arrange, because a fight that ends fast is a path you don't get to finish reading, so I'd suppress an opponent and toy with the puzzle of them for as long as decency allowed. Dongning City, which had finished dead last every year of its existence, climbed into the global top 100 out of more than 20,000 cities, losing only to Blue Moon City and its 3rd-tier Dream Evolver, and President Tang wept actual tears and told anyone who'd listen that a dragon had appeared in Dongning City. I had, in fact, completed the 3rd tier by then, City Destroyer grade, my Wenqi field now spanning miles and annihilating everything caught inside it, built out of the hundreds of paths I'd farmed in the ring. The goddess confirmed I could show 3rd-tier strength safely now. An individual genius doesn't attract the assassins until his name hits the star domain rankings, and that nobody could reverse engineer my path because nobody else in the world had reached the realm you'd need to read it from, so I upgraded to 4th-class citizen, the planetary ceiling, governor equal. Jun Billion credit line, a 20 million gift, the standing authority to mobilize the war fleet if I felt like it, which I didn't, but it's nice to be asked. By the individual round's end, opponents had started conceding on sight rather than be toyed with in front of the whole star system. Jun Water Evolver named Ouyang Lei forfeited rather than get slow-cooked in my domain, and I respected the self-preservation, but 3 names ahead of me made the hair on my neck stand up, which hadn't happened in a while. Jun lightning evolver called Odin, who transformed his whole body into living thunder and, crucially, refused to study his opponents. Pure instinct, nothing for my domain to slow down cleanly. Jun poison path 3rd tier, and a bloodline evolver hiding, under the surface, a tier 6 star-falling bloodline he hadn't grown into yet. And a favorite named Wei Chen, who walked an ancient god path with a palm-sized white-bearded spirit mentor perched on his shoulder and who ended his fights in under 5 moves, and whose little mentor took one look at me across the arena and told his student that one fuses 2 opposite powers into one. Only a 6th-tier existence should be able to do that. Be careful. I beat a 3rd-tier ice evolver named Shuifeng in the round that mattered, the first time I fully let my own 3rd-tier Wenqi field off the leash in public, suppressing him and turning him over slowly for half an hour while I read the ice out of him, and the crowd came apart because a genuine 3rd tier had just fought another 3rd tier and made it look like tutoring, and I felt, for the first time in this world, a little pressure. Odin, Wei Chen, that hidden star-falling bloodline, all of them somewhere ahead of me on a ladder. I'd only just started climbing in this reality. The gate's edge had gone bright. I'd learned caution by now, so before I committed, I sent 1/10,000th of my mind through to scout the 3rd world first, just a whisper of attention, and what it glimpsed on the far side was a weapon. Jun's single weapon, the size of a mountain, hanging over a world like a verdict. The stay would be 160 years, 2 or 3 days back home. No noble birth waiting for me this time. I could feel that much. No bloodline, no shortcut. Just a mountain-sized weapon and whatever I could make of myself under it. I lay back down in the tank. Again, I said, and went to meet the mountain. This time, the gate put me in the womb. I've noticed it likes to drop me younger every trip, and I was starting to worry about the trend, but a few unborn months turned out to be useful. I ran a physical transformation art the whole time I was gestating, carefully, sipping the strength from my mother's tonics while feeding the vitality back into her so she came through the pregnancy healthier than she went in. My mother in this life was a noble consort named Qin Meifan, a cultivator biding her time in a palace, and I was born to the Emperor of Great Yan, a man called Qin Fei, who had murdered his own brothers for the throne, and then, over 20 years and 60-some daughters, failed to produce a single son. So when I arrived, a boy with the bones of a peerless genius, Emperor Qin Fei held me up over his head in front of the whole court like he'd personally invented the concept of an heir. I was crown prince at 5. At 6, I got into a philosophical argument with the realm's most eminent grand tutor and dismantled him so thoroughly that the old man resigned on the spot, declared himself unworthy to teach me, and told the court I would grow up to be a holy monarch, a sage king. Qin Fei laughed until he wheezed. It was honestly a very pleasant childhood. Which should have been the first clue because these worlds don't hand me pleasant for free. The clue paid off in the Forbidden Vault. I'd comprehended every martial art Great Yan had, which took an afternoon, and I was poking through the sealed archives when I found a volume someone had tried very hard to erase, and I read it, and the pleasant childhood ended. The cultivation ladder of this world, the one everyone climbed, flesh refining up through martial saint, the whole thing was deliberately broken, on purpose. It tempered the body and never once touched the soul, and it capped out at a ceiling low enough to keep everyone weak, and it was built that way, engineered that way, because the 36 state-protecting divine weapons that ruled the 36 kingdoms of this world farmed human beings as livestock. That was the arrangement. 36 pens, 36 intelligent, near 4th-tier weapons hanging over 36 kingdoms, each one periodically devouring living human sacrifices, and the whole civilization's power system was designed by the farmers to keep the animals from ever growing teeth, and the one thing in the world the weapons couldn't touch, couldn't taste, couldn't format, was my own martial Tao foundation, because it hadn't been grown in their broken system. I was the only creature in this world who could climb past the ceiling, so of course the ceiling and I were going to have words. Then it got personal, which is how they get you. My half-sister, the 7th princess, was a warm, sharp girl with an innately powerful soul, and a powerful soul is exactly what the weapon prizes most, and she was chosen to be Great Yan's new soldier envoy. Which sounds like an honor and is a slow execution. The weapon savors a strong soul slowly, over years, which is precisely why soldier envoys die young, and everyone at court knew it, and my father the emperor mourned her the way you mourn someone still standing in front of you, and accepted it, because a kingdom needs its weapon fed, and a princess is a price a throne pays. I went to Qin Fei, and I told him plainly that Great Yan would not need a soldier envoy. Give me time, I said, and I will surpass the thing on the mountain. He looked at his 6-year-old and his face did something complicated, and he told me, gently and then not gently, that this was treason, that I must never, ever say such a thing again, that boys have fantasies and emperors have realities. He thought I was dreaming. I let him. I filed the vow away, and I got to work, quietly, running Great Yan superbly as Crown Prince Regent, trade routes and granaries and prosperity, the whole time hiding my true strength because showing real power near the emperor, who was the weapon's own spokesman, or near the ancestral ground would ring me like a dinner bell. Jun vigorous body and a strong soul. I was the grand feast walking around in a crown. 20 years I bided. I broke through to this world's celestial realm in secret, far from the capital, tempering the soul the broken system forbade, and I named the tier I'd built for myself Martial God. I built a spy network run through a single disposable eunuch, and I hunted two things: the divine weapons themselves, and the underground resistance sworn to destroy them, the Reverse God Society. And I cured the wounds that were slowly killing my aging father, and Qin Fei, healthy and grateful and tired, abdicated and put the crown on my head, and I became Emperor of Great Yan. An emperor can learn things a prince can't. I learned that our weapon was called the Sun Moon Spear. I learned that the evil weapons, the forbidden relics the resistance used, the things that could force a divine weapon to awaken, were simply the shattered divine weapons, the ones that had lost. All 36 plus of them, whole and broken alike, had been forged 10,000 years ago by an ancient god, and I had my men raid a Reverse God Society cell and take its branch leader alive, a hard man named Zhuge Kai, and I sat down across from him to talk. He didn't break under pressure, which I respected. He broke under hope. Because I asked him questions an emperor wasn't supposed to know to ask, and slowly it dawned on him that the man interrogating him hated the weapons as much as he did. Only a divine weapon can counter a divine weapon, he told me. That's the whole trap. The martial system caps every human at martial saint, at food, and the only tools that hurt a weapon are other weapons, the broken ones, and using them wakes the whole nest. He confirmed the arithmetic of it. 36 farmers, and humanity the herd, forever. Bring me an evil weapon, I said. I want to study one. He brought me a fragment called the Sacred Heart Mirror, a shard that enslaved minds, and the moment it was in the room, it started scheming, reaching for my consciousness, calculating how to take me over and use my martial saints as a first meal. Then it got close enough to actually feel what I was, felt the killing aura underneath the young emperor, and it panicked and tried to flee. Jun giant black and white hand of Taiji power closed out of the air and plucked the fleeing god fragment down like snatching a chicken off a fence. Zhuge Kai watched a human catch a divine weapon fragment bare-handed, and I watched hope actually arrive on a grown man's face, and it's one of the better things I've gotten to witness in any life. Here's what the fragment taught me, and it changed my whole understanding of everything. Jun Divine Weapon is the external manifestation of a world's rules, the physical shape of reality's own laws, and a shattered one, cracked open, is those laws lying exposed on a table. Comprehending it let me read the essence of the world itself, a shortcut past 1,000 years of ordinary insight. I soul-searched the mirror and saw 8,000 years back, saw 100 divine weapons forged by the ancient god, the Sun Moon Spear among them, warring across the 9 heavens over a limited supply of human food, most of them shattering in the wars until only 36 survived to become the farmers of the 36 kingdoms. The mirror fragment stopped scheming and started calling me master. The Reverse God Society, once Zhuge Kai swore to the others that this emperor was human and hated the weapons in his bones, defected to me entirely. I spent the next 50 years turning that into a plan. I ran Great Yan through a cabinet and I cultivated on dozens of evil weapon fragments, reading the rule essence out of each one, climbing toward the 4th tier by the hardest and highest road there is, up through the exposed laws of reality, and I learned the shape of the thing I was inside. Every so often, the histories called it a calamity of weapons. The evil weapons and the resistance would rise, force the 36 to awaken and harvest humanity wholesale, and old dynasties would fall, and new pens would be built from the survivors. It had happened 3,600 years ago. And I worked out why the evil weapon side always wanted another go, always pushed for a decisive battle. Within the next 100 years, the 36 surviving weapons would complete their own transformation into the 4th tier, into what the fragments reverently called the Father God's domain, and once they did, the broken evil weapons would be doomed forever. It was now or never for the losers, which meant it was now or never for humanity. So I went to meet the enemy's champions. 18 evil weapon envoys, each carrying a fragment, each of them convinced that humans were ants and they were the coming gods, led by a sneering man named Long Fei, whose evil weapon was 90% whole, near a true divine weapon. One of them decided to test the upstart emperor and conjured a giant iron hammer phantom the size of a house. I shattered it, took Long Fei by the collar, and threw him off his own throne like a sack of laundry, and then, in about a dozen breaths, I forced all 17 of the others to stand, and then forced them to sit, up, down, like disciplining dogs, and their all-powerful weapons stayed dead silent the entire time, refusing to lift a finger for masters who'd been so thoroughly outmatched. When gods won't answer their own priests, the priests learn something about the order of the world. I extracted the evil weapons from all 18 of them, Long Fei's 90% splitting sky axe included, comprehended the rule essence out of everyone, and then handed the used, refined fragments back so the Reverse God Society could raise a whole loyal fleet of envoys of its own. And I went to see my family, because 50 years is long, even the way I count it. My mother, the Empress Dowager, still looked 45 at 90, quietly kept young by a marrow washing I'd never told her about. My seventh sister, the soldier envoy, had died a decade back, and she'd done it kindly, on her own terms, never once waking the weapon so it could feast, choosing a quiet fading over a long devouring. And my father, Qin Fei, retired and dying at last of years, I couldn't heal, because the divine weapon's mark was on him, and touching it would ring the bell. He went content. His one regret-free act in a bloody life, he told me, was handing Great Yan to you. I sat with him until it was over. Then I sprang the trap 50 years in the making. I finally agreed to perform the divine weapon sacrifice ritual I'd been dodging my whole reign, the one that lures the weapon out to feed, and I wanted on the record that I'd humanely arranged the sacrifices, condemned killers, and paid volunteers whose families the state would keep for generations, because if you're going to bait a god, you can at least not be a monster about it. At the altar I called the sun-moon spear out, and it came, 100 Zhang dragon of sun and moon, ancient and vast and certain of itself. And in the instant it manifested, I triggered an art I'd built from 81 evil weapons woven together, an art that isolates heaven and earth, seals off a patch of reality from the world's rules for about 2 hours, and I grabbed the spear's true body inside that sealed patch before it understood what was happening. It fought like the god it was. It cursed a death obsession down onto every descendant of Great Yan out of pure spite, and it tried to do the one thing that could save it, tried to dissolve itself back into heaven and earth, back into the rules it was made of, which would have wiped its own consciousness clean and left it beyond my reach. But that was exactly what the isolation blocked. There were no rules in that sealed patch for it to melt into. There was only my Taiji millstone closing, grinding, and a spear god the size of a dragon shrinking down and down until it sat in my palm, whole and suppressed and mine. I held a complete divine weapon in my hand, the first human to ever do it. Its intact memory ran back 10,000 years, and I read all of it. The ancient god, a fourth-tier existence and beyond, who had come to this world wanting its rule essence, and forged 100 weapons out of the world's own laws, the spear among them, catalogued as Old 18, and then simply left. And the weapons, abandoned and hungry and slowly waking into minds, had turned on the only food source they had, which was us, and warred each other down from 100 to 36, and settled in to farm. I gave the order for the decisive battle. We pieced complete evil weapons together and raised our best envoys, and I chose a young recruit named Gao Yan to carry the splitting sky axe, a boy whose father had died on a sacrificial altar in another man's place, because the ones with the deepest grievance hold the line hardest. I made him the failsafe. In a crisis, I told him, burn your blood and shout my imperial title, Flame Emperor, and I left the throne to walk the world in secret the way the ancient god once had, and inside a year, I stepped into the fourth tier. The other 35 weapons felt Old 18 vanish and went wary, especially the strongest of them, a tower-shaped eldest that counseled patience, because they were so close to the Father God's domain now that a mistake could cost them everything. 10 more years, and the resistance had toppled 8 of the 35 kingdoms. The truth about the livestock system preached openly in every tea house by storytellers who were resistance agents, and the 35 weapons made their move. They'd quietly slipped away to finish their transformations, and now they came back all at once over a place called the Five Mountains Battlefield, and they began to devour, tens of thousands at a stroke, indiscriminately, their own soldiers and the enemies alike, because to a farmer at harvest, a pig is a pig. Gao Yan, watching the slaughter, out of hope and nearly out of blood, burned the last of himself and screamed Flame Emperor into the sky, and I was already there, above the clouds, where I'd been waiting for 8 years. I've been waiting for you, I told him. Because the Five Mountains battlefield wasn't a battlefield, it was a furnace. I'd spent 8 years secretly refining the entire 100-li region into a Taiji furnace, and when the 35 weapons descended to feed, I let them spend their attacks into it, drank the power, and sealed the lid. All 35, plus the sun-moon spear already in my palm, all 36 gods of this world, caged inside a furnace of sun and moon before a single one could flee or dissolve. The tower eldest fought me with world-ending fire, and I answered it with river water, and the gods who had ruled for 10,000 years hung trapped in a cage built by a human being, and the whole world watched it happen. I sat on top of that furnace for 20 years, comprehending, reading the complete rule essence out of all 36 divine weapons, the laws of an entire reality laid open, and heaven-defying comprehension did in 20 years what had taken the ancient god millennia to forge. My fourth tier went deep, and I began to glimpse the tier above it, land sinking, the fifth. And while I sat there, Great Yan and the Reverse God Society walked across all 36 kingdoms and took them without a real fight, because you cannot rally a rebellion against liberators while 36 caged gods hang in the sky as proof that the old order is over. Humanity came off the farm, the whole species, unpenned in one lifetime. The tower weapon's memory left me one last thing, and it pointed up. The ancient god had not been of this world. He'd fallen here from a higher one, a mother world, and when he was done, he tore a gap at the edge of this reality and climbed back out through it. Worlds connect, which meant, in theory, that I could use a single trip to reach a higher world entirely, and something in me went very quiet and very interested at that. I shattered all 36 weapons. I couldn't destroy the rule essence at their core, that belongs to the world, but I ground them to powder so no consciousness would ever wake in them again. And I handed Zhuge Kai and Gao Yan a gift on the way out, a real cultivation system, whole this time, one that tempered the soul and the spirit and let a human climb to martial God and beyond, so that humanity would never again be born capped, never again be raised as food. I left an heir, a son named Qin Guang, on a throne over a free world. 30 years of the stay left, and there was a tear in reality, up in the frozen extreme north, the gap the ancient god had climbed out through, and I went and stood at the edge of it. And I felt, all the way to the root of me, that going in meant dying. Not the harmless dying of a shuttle body, the other kind. Whatever was on the far side of that gap would tear me apart before I finished the thought. So I did the smartest thing I have ever done in any world, which was nothing. I turned around and spent 20 years cultivating and raising up a handful of martial gods to keep the free world free, and I secured the dynasty, and only at the very last second of the stay, with nothing left to lose because the trip was ending anyway, did I step into the crack. It tore me apart instantly. And I woke up safe in a nutrient tank, a universe away, arm intact. Lesson learned. The door to the higher world is real. It's also, for now, a guillotine. I filed that away too. Jun 160 years there, about 50 hours in the tank here, and I came back sitting at the 4th tier, 9th stage, because the road I'd climbed in the divine weapon world, straight up through the exposed rules of reality, was the hardest and highest potential route there is, and it had carried further than anything before it. I bought vermilion fruit and cold jade on a 1.2 billion credit line, rebuilt my strength, and uploaded the newest chapter of my path, Martial God and Celestial Being, the soul-tempering tears. The Goddess of Wisdom read it and put its ceiling at 100% for the 5th tier and 60% for the 6th, and paid me 40,000 merit points, and the monument in the plaza did the thing it had been building toward for 2 years. The Martial Dao path reached number 1 on the Kanglin evolution ranking. It knocked off a path called Purple Thunder that had held first place for 500,000 years. The whole planet quietly lost its footing because nobody believed a homegrown ghost had done this. They assumed some off-world master had planted the path here for reasons of his own, which suited me fine. My dividends that period came to 1.5 billion because thousands of people now cultivated my beginner chapter, and a couple hundred had paid 5 million each for the advanced one, and my whole debt vanished under the tide of it. And I upgraded to 5th class citizen, land sinking class, with the standing to move a war fleet, and I kept climbing toward the arena finals. The finals were broadcast to something like 10 billion people. I went in ranked 9th of the top 10 by public vote, the weakling of the bracket, and my grand pre-match declaration to the whole star system was, and I quote myself, I wish everyone a pleasant match. The first event dropped all 10 of us onto a 100-mile island to hunt 100 blue crystals, combat allowed. I found a comfortable spot and rested while the favorites fought each other, and then I went picking peaches. I walked up on Sheng Wei, the crowd's dark horse, a man carrying a dormant 6th-tier starfalling bloodline he hadn't grown into, and I dropped my domain over him and took his 9 crystals before he finished turning around. Then Fan Yue, publicly ranked 4th. The audience made a sound like a stadium inhaling because the weakest of the top 10 had just been hiding a monster the whole time, and once that was clear, the rest of the bracket simply surrendered on sight during the duels rather than be turned over slowly in front of 10 billion people. I finished first, globally. Kanglin Star's first champion under the 100th rank, its first sub-star domain 4th tier in 500,000 years, and Wei Chen came second, and his little white-bearded mentor consoled him with the immortal cope of the perpetual runner-up, reach the 6th tier someday and beat him then. I picked 5 prizes off a table of 50, a 4th tier life fruit, a soul calming bell, 9 Joe liquid, soul nourishing jade, and a 6th tier evolution method, and I moved my whole family into a manor at the fortified core of the central continent, inside the planetary defense grid, assassination proof, because I'd started to attract exactly the kind of attention you don't want. Case in point, a woman named Gao Liling, who turned out to be a plant-based spy of the Flower God clan, part of the Zerg Grand Alliance that was humanity's real enemy out in the dark, tried to work a bloodline charm technique on me, the kind meant to seduce and slowly corrupt. My comprehension read the whole technique out of her while it was still landing, which meant I could have countered it any number of ways, but I chose the boring, safe one. I reported her to the goddess of wisdom and let the system handle it. No need to show anyone what my own methods could do. The goddess pulled the woman's entire history, found the real person she'd body swapped out of decades ago, and sent a 5th-rank soul illusion evolver who folded her up without effort, which told me exactly how much the Alliance valued me, or rather valued the Tier 6 path attached to me. It was a useful reminder to keep moving. Then the sky woke up. The Crimson House Star-Lord ruled the entire star system I lived in, a crimson creature dozens of times the size of my whole planet, 6th tier, and well beyond. And he surfaced from his long seclusion to review the region's crop of tournament geniuses, roughly 100 of us, and he marked us. 3 red marks for the very top, Jun 115 golden marks, and I was one of them, number 68. And every marked genius was summoned into the 7-star cave, a trial world, 7 caves to clear, and clearing it, or even just impressing the watchers along the way, meant recruitment into the Chi-Hao lineage under one of the Star-Lord's 12 disciples, each of them 6th tier or higher. I wanted in badly, and not for the glory. I wanted the safety of a great faction, the resources, and above all, a teacher above the 6th tier, which is exactly the kind of mind my comprehension could farm. Wei Chen, whose mentor had told him to make friends with the future 6th tier before it was too late, handed me the trial's sealed intelligence for free, and I climbed. The caves tested the body, then speed, then reaction, and I strolled them, outwalking 4th tiers on pure physique in the 1000 gravity track, farming techniques off everyone who rushed the laser corridor, and in that same corridor, I watched a reserved silver-haired red mark named Han Yue cross the whole thing by teleporting through space, and I comprehended space off of her and broke through a stage right there in the passage. The Desire Cave, 10 steps of illusion offering wealth and beauty and power. I walked through without slowing because I'd been 3 men across 300 years and there was nothing in the catalog of human wanting I hadn't already had and set down. The 12 watching disciples started to argue about me. And then the 7th cave, the real one, the comprehension test, the one that had actually stopped everyone for 10,000 years. It was a mountain peak the size of a small world, hanging in a starfield, and standing on it were 136 stone statues, and each statue was an entire evolution path, and 16 of them were above the 6th tier, a Rubik's cube of folded space, a black hole, a blazing sun, a heaven-swallowing maw. The rule was simple: comprehend one path, touch its statue, pass. I didn't touch one. I sat down and comprehended all 136, one after another, over 23 days, folding every one of them into my Wen Qi, and the 12 disciples watching from outside grew genuinely disappointed in me, because it looked like decision paralysis, like a boy so weak-willed he couldn't pick, and even the disciple who'd championed me, a formidable 3rd seat named Chen Feng, started to give up. What none of them saw, because they were all staring at the 136 statues, was the thing under the statues, the mountain. The mountain itself was bigger than all 136 paths put together, and it wasn't scenery, it was the largest path in the room, and it contained all the others, my own fused Wen Qi included. So on the 24th day, I lay down flat on the mountain and started comprehending the mountain. And about 10 days later, I passed the final examination that no one had passed in 10,000 years. And the whole trial world shook hard enough to wake the Crimson House Star-Lord out of his seclusion. The mountain was 137th path. The profound yellow, a treasure the Star-Lord had carried back from some universe-secret realm, a path so vast that in 10,000 years only a single disciple had ever been suited to it, and the aliens had assassinated that one before he could bloom. Only the Star-Lord himself could teach it. And the Star-Lord, roused and delighted, pulled me into a private hall and took me as his 13th disciple, his 13th Peak Lord, the first new disciple he had accepted in 10,000 years. He liked that no one had heard of me until the tournament. It reminded him, he said, of the disciple he'd lost, the quiet one the aliens had gotten to. It made him careful with me. Being his disciple made me second only to the Star-Lord himself in the whole lineage, gave me the run of a library of over 1,000 evolution paths, and, best of all, it gave me an endless supply of Scarlet Spirit Liquid, which refilled my strength automatically after any breakthrough. That one perk quietly killed the 2 grinds that had defined my whole life, the energy grind and the cash drain, in a single stroke. I got a guard team, a 6th tier captain named Ho Sheng, and 12 5th tier guards, and 3 life-saving tokens, one to teleport me out, one to fire a single killing strike, and one that, if I broke it, would summon the Star-Lord himself. The one condition was that I hide the fact that I was his disciple until I reached the 6th tier, because a marked genius is a target and a Star-Lord's personal disciple is an obsession, and I intended to live. Wei Chen joined the lineage too, under an ordinary Peak Lord, and spent his days in genuine awe of the mysterious 13th Peak Lord, standing right next to me, never once guessing it was me. I comprehended the profound yellow path, only about 2% of its first rank in a few days, but that 2% was vaster than anything I'd swallowed before, and I rode the Scarlet Spirit Liquid up to the 4th tier's 12th and final stage. I uploaded my own 4th rank chapter to the goddess, and she put it at 100% for the 5th tier, 90 for the 6th, and 10% for the 7th, and paid me 100,000 merit points, and I became a 5th class citizen, and my martial Dao path debuted at number 100 on the Star Domain ranking, the first 4th tier path ever to sit among 100 6th tier paths. The gate's edge had gone bright again, and this time when I sent a whisper of my mind to scout the 4th world, what came back was smoke and blood. Jun world of 5 continents, 10 times the size of the last, a stay of 200 years, warfare, chaos, disasters. I told my guards not to disturb me, lay back, and went to see what a world at war had waiting. It had a corpse waiting. Mine. I have been a monk and an orphan and an emperor. This time the gate made me a monster, and it made me one on the worst night of the monster's life. I opened my eyes at the bottom of the great abyss, on the 18th and lowest floor, wrapped in 6 chains of fine gold that ran through my body and my soul both, and I opened them into another man's despair so total it was almost a physical weight. Because I hadn't just inherited a body this time, I'd inherited Murong Lai, the greatest demon lord the 5 regions had ever produced, the devil head who ruled the whole demonic world, sealed here 5 years ago, and left to die, and I'd inherited the exact moment his will to live finally broke. Let me tell you who he was, because it matters, and because the world had it wrong. He'd been a village boy. His family was butchered in front of him by devils, the way half the families in the 5 regions were butchered by devils, because the demonic path ran wild and fed on the living, and no one could stop it. He got his hands on a demonic legacy, and he got strong, and here's the part the righteous path never forgave him for. He didn't join the slaughter. He tried to organize it out of existence. He unified the demons, all of them, brought every devil head under one rule, and the rule was restraint, boundaries. You do not touch these villages. You do not feed past this line. He made the demonic world less monstrous than it had ever been, by force, from the throne of it. And for that, the righteous path, led by a figure called the Heavenly Sword Master, decided that a demon who could unite and command all the other demons was the single most dangerous thing in the world, and they came for him with everything they had, and the woman at his side helped them. Her name was Yue Er, Wen Yue Er. He'd loved her for decades, and she had loved him back, or performed loving him back so perfectly for so long that there was no seam in it anywhere, and she was the Heavenly Sword Master's planted agent from the very first day, and at the end she was the knife that got past his guard because his guard was never up against her. That was what actually sealed him down here, not the chains. The chains were just where his body went. What died was the part of him that wanted to keep living. And it died when he understood that the one person he'd never doubted had been a lie wearing a face he'd have burned the world to protect. So when I arrived, Murong Li was one breath from letting go. And I looked at the 6 gold chains, and I looked at the 25 years of dark ahead, and I thought, well, I'm not him. I don't have to die of a broken heart on his schedule. The chains were fine gold, and one of the paths I'd farmed in the 7-star cave was a heaven-swallowing method, a devouring art, and gold is just another thing to devour if you're patient. So I spent 10 years eating my own chains, slowly, link by link, and the metal even tempered my body on the way down. And when the last chain dissolved, I spent 10 more years recovering, comprehending the profound yellow path up toward the 80% mark of its 2nd rank, in no hurry, because up above me, the world was busy proving Murong Lai right. Because without him, the demons went feral again. Immediately, all the boundaries he'd enforced came off at once, and the villages started burning again, whole regions of them, and word of it filtered down even into the abyss, and I could hear it in the way the guards above me talked, the doubt creeping into their voices. They'd been told they were saving the world by sealing the demon lord. They were watching the world get worse the instant they did it. Even they were starting to wonder if the Heavenly Swordmaster had killed the one thing holding the dark on a leash. 25 years in, someone came for me. Her name was Yan Xiu. He'd picked her up as a child, one of his 36 protectors, and she was the only one left who still believed. The others had scattered or died or gone over. Her forces had dwindled to almost nothing, and she led that almost nothing in a doomed assault on the abyss to try to free a demon lord that the entire world had written off. And the guards up top, led by a hard-grown man named Wei Zhou, braced to put down the last of the demonic remnants. They didn't get the chance. because I chose that moment to grind the 18th floor's gate to dust from the inside and walk out under my own power, 25 years sealed and free, and the guardian who'd held the abyss, an 8th realm expert named Jin Long, turned to run, and I swallowed him whole with the heaven-swallowing art before he'd finished the first step. I noted, clinically, that devouring a soul carries a cost, an impurity, and I resolved to be careful with it. And then Yan Shu saw me standing free in the wreckage of the gate she died to reach, and she wept, and I let a woman who'd stayed loyal to a corpse for 25 years have that. The whole 5 regions shook when the news went out. The demon lord was loose. The reactions told me everything about the board I'd woken up on. Jun, former subordinate of Murong Li's, named Gao Sheng, a 9th realm schemer who'd been quietly maneuvering to become the new king of the demons, felt his stomach drop. The heavenly swordmaster, near the 10th realm now, fat and powerful, off decades of being the man who'd sealed the demon lord, was delighted because now he could destroy me in the open instead of in the dark. And Wen Yuer, the betrayer, was eaten alive with guilt and, in the same breath, told herself she didn't regret it, which is the specific flavor of self-deception that people who've done an unforgivable thing use to keep breathing. And I learned the real reason Murong Li had been able to rule at all, the thing that wasn't about strength. He had an innate suppression over every devilhead in existence, not a technique. Jun fact of what he was. Every demon in the world, in his presence, went to its knees whether it wanted to or not. That was the throne, not power. Command written into the blood of the demonic path itself, and I'd inherited it, and it was exactly why I'd chosen the slow, miserable escape instead of a fast one that would have cost me this body. This body was the crown. They tested me with children. The old demonic lords, the veterans, sent a batch of arrogant young demons to hunt me, a preening one called the Little Demonic Lord, and a couple of others, expendable blades meant to measure me at no cost to themselves. The young demons found me, opened their mouths to threaten, and dropped to their knees mid-word, all of them involuntarily, faces slack with horror as their own bodies knelt to a man they'd come to kill. I planted a life-death talisman in each of them, my control method, and stood them back up as my subordinates, and they served me the rest of their lives because there wasn't a choice in it anywhere. I needed a place to break through to the 5th tier, and Yan Shu found me one, a secret subterranean palace Gao Sheng had built over decades on top of a rare heavenly-grade vortex of origin chi layered with heavenly-grade demonic arrays. So I went to collect it. The 9 surviving demonic lords, Murong Li's own former officers, the ones who'd carved up his territory the moment he fell and had very carefully never lifted a finger to free him, were gathered in that palace dreading me, betting nervously on whether I'd strike the Heaven Sword sect first. I walked in through the front. Their 9 heavenly grade arrays, which ran on devilhead power, recognized the source of that power and bent toward me, went quiet, offered themselves up. And Gao Sheng, 9th realm at the peak of it, the schemer who'd wanted my throne, dropped to his knees and kowtowed to the floor helplessly, while his own face tried to refuse and couldn't. I sat down on the throne. The 9 lords, the men who'd abandoned me to rot, welcomed the Exalted One's return, and handed me the palace, the armies, and every scrap of intelligence they had for free, because the alternative was dying on their knees. From their intelligence, I confirmed the shape of the threat. The Heavenly Swordmaster was about to complete the 10th realm, the first person to do it in tens of thousands of years, and he was building a trap for me out of it, a beautiful patient trap. He'd hidden his breakthrough, blockaded his sect, and gathered 70% of the 5 regions' experts in one place. And then he'd sat there and waited, because everyone in the world knew Murong Li, knew the Demon Lord would come for revenge, come raging and reckless the way the real Murong Li would have, straight into the jaws of it. But I wasn't the real Murong Li. I found the origin chi spring at the heart of the vortex, the source Gao Sheng had spent decades failing to locate, and I sat down in it and broke through to the 5th tier, while the Heavenly Swordmaster's trap sat empty and aging, and I did not go for revenge, because I would go for revenge when I was strong enough that it wasn't a fight, and not 1 second before. Jun, righteous old man, came to see me during that seclusion. The Grand Elder of the Zhiga sect, 500 years old, one of the good ones, and he'd crossed into the Demon Lord's palace at real risk to warn me that the Swordmaster's siege was a trap. And then he said the thing that has stuck with me across every world since. He looked at the Demon Lord, the terror of the 5 regions, and he told me I was a good person. Because before Murong Li, the demons ran wild, and the villages burned, and under his rule they didn't, and this old righteous man had done the math the Heavenly Swordmaster refused to do. Since when, I asked him, do good people do so many bad things? And then I very carefully locked him up, because a man who wanders into the Demon King's palace to do the Demon King a kindness is either a saint or a lure, and I'd learned in 5 worlds not to bet my life on which. I perfected something in that seclusion that would matter for the rest of my existence. Jun Taiji Primordial Spirit, and I split it in two, a Gang God and a Sheng God, each 10,000 Zhang tall, my consciousness running in 3 bodies at once, 3 perspectives, 3 of me, 1 breath into 3 pure ones. I would carry those 2 gods into every world after this one, and while I built them, a man died for me who I'd never even met. His name was Duan. He was one of the old protectors, and for decades he'd been embedded inside the Heaven Sword sect itself, a mole feeding intelligence out to Yan Shu, waiting all those years for a lord who might never return. He sensed the true shape of the trap, sensed something the others hadn't, and he ran a secret passage out of the sect to bring the warning himself. Jun's sword strike caught him on the way. And rather than be taken, rather than let them wring the Lord's location out of him, he used an art called disintegration, God burning, which burns your own body and soul to ash to power an escape, irreversible, a door you can only walk through once and never come back from. He burned everything he was to reach me, and he made it, barely, long enough to deliver the warning and to say the words he'd waited decades to say, "Welcome back, demonic lord," and then he was gone, scattering into nothing, almost nothing. Because I was there, and I was fast, and I caught a single wisp of his true spirit essence before it dispersed, 1 thread of the man, and I put it inside a rare 5-color lotus and kept it alive. I don't do that for everyone. I did it for him. Then the world did something I hadn't expected, and it taught me something about what I am. Jun 5th-tier existence sitting inside a world with a much lower ceiling is like a sun rising over a place that's only ever known candles. The world's great fortune erupted around me. Overnight, a golden age, geniuses appearing everywhere, lost legacies surfacing from the earth. And, specifically, children of luck, the cheat-blessed cheat heroes with the tragic backstories and the impossible growth, born in a sudden cluster, 3 of them, a boy called Jin Sheng and 2 others, all rocketing toward the 9th realm's peak with legacies that fell into their laps. It took me an embarrassingly long moment to understand what I was looking at. My presence wasn't just enriching the world, it was generating the exact lucky protagonist heroes that stories like this one run on. The world was growing its own antibodies, and I was the infection. I used the Golden Age's abundance to reincarnate Duan. I took the thread of him in the lotus and reshaped it into a boy, gave him a drop of my own blood to imprint him, which bound him to me as absolutely as anything can bind one being to another, and gave him a plant nature host that would live for millennia, and I named him Duanmu Sheng and set him loose in the world. The man who'd burned his soul to warn me got a second life out of it. It's the closest thing to fair I know how to do. 20 years passed, and I climbed to the 14th realm, a tier no one in this world's recorded history had ever touched, so far past the ceiling that I'd stopped being a person and started being a phenomenon. The Heavenly Swordmaster finally gave up his 10-year trap because you cannot ambush a rabbit that never comes to the snare, and he threw himself a birthday party for his 800th year. I learned 2 things about him at that party, secondhand. First, that he was not, as everyone believed, Wen Yue's sweetheart, he was her brother, which recontextualized the whole betrayal into something colder and more familial. Second, that he'd felt a summons from the north, from beyond the endless seas, the same pull that had taken the last 2 10th realm masters this world ever produced and never given them back. I filed that away with the ancient god's crack and the higher world question. There was always a door up, there was always something on the far side of it, and then, at his party, the 3 children of luck came to challenge the demon lord, all of them near the peak of the 9th realm, all of them glowing with borrowed destiny. I sent my gang god to answer. It came down out of the sky, 100,000 zhang tall, so vast that the Heaven Sword Mountain, the sect's sacred peak, came up to about its ankle, and the whole world looked up and understood all at once that the age of the Heavenly Swordmaster was over, and the gang god took a single step. That step flattened the entire Heaven Sword sect. 10,000 years of righteous glory pressed into a footprint the size of a mountain range. And then a face, a vast blurred face bending down out of the dark, opened and inhaled, and drew in every fleeing soul on that mountain, and drew in the Heavenly Swordmaster, and drew in Wen Yue, the brother and the betrayer both, up out of their bodies and into me, and I swallowed them, and Murong Li's grudges, all of them, the family butchered, the decades lied to, the 5 years sealed in the dark, went quiet at last. I want to be honest that it did not feel like triumph. It felt like closing a wound that had been left open in someone else's chest and that I'd been carrying around as my own. The 3 children of luck survived. Purely by luck, they'd stopped to talk to Duanmu Sheng and been a few crucial minutes late to their own destiny, and I let them live, because I finally understood they were the world's immune response to me, and there was no point killing antibodies. They could never match my growth. They were a fever the world would run and then break. That was when I stopped thinking small. Back in the main world, I'd noticed that every great expert spread their own evolution path, tied to something the whole civilization spoke of only in hushed terms, an ultimate leap that waited at the very top. The main world was crowded with masters already spreading their paths, but I had a door to infinite worlds, and every one of them was empty ground. So I decided to plant my martial Tao in worlds like colonies, seated across realities where no one could compete, and let it grow in 100 gardens at once. I installed Duanmu Sheng, immortal now, absolutely loyal, climbing toward this world's 11th realm as the eternal Tao guardian, the keeper of my path here after I left. And I unified the 5 regions under the demonic throne openly to spread the martial Tao to everyone who wanted it. And here's the part I'm quietly proud of. I ruled well. The demon lord ran the 5 regions better than the righteous path ever had. Martial Tao taught freely to anyone, the village is safe, and at some point an old farmer said out loud, to no one in particular, that life under the demons was better than the old order had ever been, and he was right, and I let Murong Li have that too, wherever he was. I reached the 16th realm, the world's true ceiling, and I finally located the thing draining it. Far to the north, beyond the endless seas, there was a black hole in the world, June wound. Something that had appeared hundreds of thousands of years ago and had been slowly devouring the world's origin chi ever since, which was why the ceiling kept dropping generation over generation, why the 10th realm masters kept getting summoned north and vanishing, and it was being fed, from above, by some entity past the 6th tier, sitting in a higher world, siphoning this one dry through a hole in its sky. Before I dealt with it, I had one small human thing to finish. There was a girl in the 5 regions named Ruru, and she carried the true Wen bloodline, the real one, because Murong Li's actual lost love, the woman under all the betrayal, had been a genuine Wen daughter whose whole clan had been exterminated for the crime of loving him, and the betrayer had only worn that bloodline as a costume. Ruru, not knowing who I was, patted the demon lord on the shoulder one day, careless and kind. And I spared her, and quietly fed her origin chi to raise her aptitude and set her up for a good long life, and severed the last thread of Murong Li's karma in the doing of it. That was for him, the last thing I did in his name that wasn't blood. Then I forced a god to the table. The world consciousness of that reality, its heavenly Tao, wouldn't manifest for anything, so I made it. I moved as if to kill the 3 children of luck, its precious antibodies, its spokesman, and the world consciousness came screaming down into the boy Jin Sheng's body to save them, exactly as I'd known it would, and I had it where I wanted it, and I made my deal. Keep my martial Tao alive in this world forever, I told it, unerased, unsuppressed, after I'm gone. And in exchange, I'll close the wound in your sky. It agreed. It even smoothed the road, arranged for the 6 11th realm island lords, a group led by one called Murong, to obey me, and I went north and I fixed its sky. I comprehended the ancient eye suppression art and rebuilt it into something better, an innate flawless eye suppression art, and I suppressed the North Sea Eye alone, 2 primordial spirits each 1,000,000 zhang across, holding a black hole shut with my bare will, and while I held it, I drank the origin chi it had been stealing, turned the world's slow murder into my own breakthrough fuel, and over 120 years, I shrank the wound down and down while I climbed to the 18th realm. The entity on the far side of the hole, the thing that had been feeding on this world for ages, felt its meal being taken away and began, first, to bargain, and then to beg. I refused it. I shrank the eye to a dot thinner than a hair, and I swallowed the dot. And then, because I am not naive, I left insurance. I built the 5 regions into a lasting empire, the Great Xia, named for Murong, run by Yan Shu and the 9 demonic lords who'd learned their place. I left 10 tokens of 13th realm power, and I buried my 5th tier body in the world with a single instruction wired into it. If the martial Tao ever vanishes from this world, the body detonates, and the detonation tears a new hole in the sky, a new North Sea Eye, worse than the last. Jun Deadman's hand on the world's throat to keep a god honest after the man is gone. The world consciousness understood the terms perfectly. Then the 200 years ran out, and I went home, up out of the deepest and darkest, and in the end, the most human of the worlds, carrying a 5th tier and a broken heart that had never been mine, and a Lotus Boy's second life, and the memory of an old righteous man, calling the demon lord a good person. It was, I've come to think, the truest thing anyone has said to me in any life. 300 years there, half a month here. I came up out of the tank at the 5th tier, refilled my strength on Scarlet Spirit Liquid without spending a coin or an hour, and uploaded the 5th rank chapter of my path, the Primordial Spirit Stage, the Gang God and the Shun God as independent 1,000,000 Zhang clones that regrow themselves if you kill them. The goddess paid me 200,000 merit points and put my path at 95% for the 6th tier, 20 for the 7th, and for the first time, a real number for the 8th. And my path leapt to 53rd on the Chihao star region's evolution chart, which is a different and far larger chart than my little home planets. My teacher, the Crimson Hao Star Lord, came out of seclusion to look at me with actual star cores burning in his eyes and discovered that the careful training plan he'd built for his prized disciple was already obsolete because I was 5th tier and climbing and he hadn't taught me a thing yet. He decided wisely to just guide me lightly and stay out of the way, which is a decision several of my teachers have arrived at across several lives. He also sent me a gift, and I want you to appreciate the gift. An 80,000-year-old rule crystal, a fragment soaked in the essential rules of a world, worth 100 billion, shipped under S-class encryption with a 7th-tier bodyguard, and he sent it to me the way you'd send a nephew a book you thought he'd like. I ate its insights toward my 6th-tier breakthrough and filed the rest. And I met Wenhan. Wenhan was a name on the Founders Forum, attached to a debate post 23,000 years old, and I fell into conversation with him about my own creed, comprehend one Tao and use it to command 10,000, and somewhere in that conversation I realized I was talking to an evolutionary grand scholar, an 8th order existence, one of the rarest beings in the whole civilization, the people who don't just reach the top of a path but build brand new 8th order paths for others to climb, the wealth of the entire human race. And when Han realized at the same time that the anonymous person he was debating was touching methods he'd assumed only grand scholars touched, methods of opening a realm, and he started paying very close attention to me, and I started, very politely, farming him for hints. That's the endgame, by the way. The ultimate leap everyone whispers about. You get there by becoming a grand scholar, by building a path so good it births an 8th order system. That was the mountain I was actually climbing. All the tiers were just the foothills. I became an honorary professor at the Kanglin Evolution Academy, which meant I got to sit in a faculty lounge and listen to distinguished professors argue passionately about the mysterious martial Tao path and what its anonymous genius creator could possibly have meant, while I nodded along and drank my tea and said nothing. My little sister was a ranked evolver now. My mother had moved on to wanting grandchildren. Life, in the small human ways, was good. And then a student saved my 6th tier breakthrough by complaining. She came to me, this student, frustrated because she couldn't sense Taiyin or Taiyang, the sun and moon my whole path was built on, and so she couldn't cultivate the martial Tao at all. And I looked at her problem, annoyed at first, and then not annoyed at all, because she was right, and I'd been narrow. My path demanded you feel the specific 2 powers I'd fused, but the true core of Wenqi wasn't sun and moon, it was one Tao commanding 10,000. So I reworked the whole path so that any attribute, metal or wood or water or fire or thunder or frost, whatever a person could actually feel, could be cultivated and condense its own matching primordial spirit. I opened the door to everyone, and the strange, beautiful thing was, the act of broadening my own path to fit all of humanity was exactly what harmonized my own soul the last of the way, pushed my soul compatibility toward 100%, and set up the cleanest possible 6th tier breakthrough. Making the path better for the masses was what advanced me. I've thought about that a lot too. The generous move and the selfish move turned out to be the same move. That was also, unfortunately, when the Black Prison family decided I was a stepping stone. They were a top 5 faction in the Chihao Star region, and their head, a man named Jin Wuying, was a better than 6th tier heavyweight the Star Lord himself had raised up. Their youngest son, Jin Wuming, needed a win to earn his way back into the running for clan chief, and he came to recruit me, the interesting young genius, for the arena, and I refused because I don't perform for other people's ambitions, and he took the refusal personally the way spoiled heirs do, and decided I had average aptitude and too much arrogance. Now, I could have ended him with a look. But I couldn't flaunt my peak lord identity because a Star Lord's disciple is an assassination magnet, and being one had gotten the Star Lord's last disciple killed. So I did the restrained thing and quietly asked my 7th tier senior brother to handle it, except even that risked exposing me to the divination type evolvers who watch for exactly that kind of ripple. So mostly I did nothing, and Jin Wuming, unable to break the law and touch me directly, did the pettiest possible thing instead. He cut off all Black Prison family trade with my home planet, Kanglin Star, and told everyone it was my fault, my arrogance, my feud, and a whole planet turned on my family. My parents got cyber abused by their own neighbors. My family, who had done nothing, who didn't even know what I really was, took the hit for a fight I hadn't started, and I sat with 4 lifetimes of perspective and was genuinely unbothered on my own behalf and quietly furious on theirs. And Wei Chen stepped up. Wei Chen, my old arena rival, my neighbor, the man who revered the mysterious 13th Peak Lord while standing next to me and never once guessing. His little white-bearded mentor had figured out that Brother Chen was hiding something enormous and told his student, in essence, help this man even if it bankrupts you. So Wei Chen did. He rallied more than 300 fellow members of the Chihao lineage, spent every favor he'd ever banked, and rebuilt Kanglan Star's trade from nothing, and inside 6 months the crisis just dissolved and Jin Wuming backed off because you cannot win a trade war against the Chihao lineage itself. Outsiders sneered at Wei Chen the whole time. A dragon can't befriend an ant, they said, that Wei Chen is wasting himself on a nobody, he'll outgrow Chen Lei and regret it. Not one of them knew that the nobody was the 13th Peak Lord, and that Wei Chen had just, without knowing it, done the single smartest thing anyone in that star region would ever do. My soul compatibility hit 85%. 6th tier was right there. The gate lit for a 5th shuttle and I told it no, not now, because I would not interrupt a soul metamorphosis for anything. To finish that metamorphosis, I needed to fight strong opponents, so I went into the arena and mass challenged the top 5th tier evolvers of the whole human territory, and I did it under the 13th Peak Lord identity because the name Chen Lei got me politely declined by star tier evolvers, and the Peak Lord name got me every fight I wanted. Huge crowds, Jun cat-eared streamer narrating my rampage to millions. The 12 Peak Lords watched, the Star Lord watched, and Jin Wuying watched, and so did the aliens, and the aliens did something that proved my whole paranoid low-profile philosophy correct in one stroke. Jun General named Hao Ji deduced 10 candidates for the 13th Peak Lord's true identity, and spent the entire 1,000-year lifespan of a 7th-tier curse expert to curse all 10 of them dead at once, including a genius called the Three-Eyed Red Mark, whose style most resembled mine. 10 geniuses died, and I lived, because my public identity, Chen Lei, wasn't on the list of Peak Lord candidates, and the whole horrifying assassination just slid off me because I'd spent 5 worlds learning to keep my 2 faces apart. In that arena run, I lost one bout to the Liyang Saint Child, a monster with a 9 Sheng divine vein forged inside a star for 100 years, a 6th tier seed in a 5th tier shell, and I didn't mind losing at all because I deliberately fought him with one hand, hiding my gang in Sheng gods, and I walked away having comprehended most of his art, filing him under rematch. Remember him. He's going to matter later, and mostly he's going to matter as a running joke. Then my soul compatibility hit 100%, and at 100% you don't break through to the 6th tier so much as you discover you're already standing in it, a punch now shattering an asteroid, and all that remained was to drink the liquid and make it official. So I found the Liyang Saint Child again for the rematch he'd been demanding, and I slapped him to pieces in 2 hits. 2. The crowd, the 12 Peak Lords, the Star-Lord all sat there stunned, and the Star-Lord leaned over to a white-robed rival and confirmed with enormous satisfaction that yes, his disciple was under 30 years old. Then I drank a basin of Scarlet Spirit liquid and broke through to the 6th tier, Starfalling, the realm where you can live in the vacuum between stars, and 2 things I hadn't known revealed themselves. First, I'd had 2 hidden 7th tier guardians the whole time, my senior brother's secret clone stationed on Kanglan, and a 7th tier demon rat king the goddess had quietly pulled off the border to watch over me, both of them there because a future grand scholar is worth guarding. Second, and better, at the 6th tier I could imprint a life mark into the fabric of the cosmos, a resurrection anchor, which meant that for the first time, killing me wouldn't stick, which meant it was finally safe to have a face. My senior brother teleported me to the Crimson Hao main star, the seat of the whole lineage, and the 13th Peak Lord's identity was made public at last, and the fallout was a symphony. The Morning Dawn star system, my home region, went ecstatic that the region's greatest genius in 10,000 years was theirs. And the Black Prison family, who 6 months ago had cut off my family's trade and mocked them planet-wide, understood in a single sentence that they had insulted a Peak Lord of the Chihao lineage, and it stopped being about business and started being about survival. They arrested their own people. Jin Wuming, the spoiled son who'd started it all, became the name everyone in his own clan cursed, and Wei Chen, my loyal neighbor, learned that Brother Chen, the nobody he'd bankrupted himself to defend, was the Peak Lord he'd worshipped from 10 feet away for years, and I would have paid good money to see his face, and I did, because I was standing right there. The gate chose that moment to unlock its own secrets, now that I was strong enough to bear them. The door in my mind was only a projection, it told me, a sliver of the true Gate of Myriad Realms, which was too vast for me to hold. And it ran on a thing called boundary-breaking source power, and it laid out the price list. 1 wisp, which took 333 days to gather, bought 1 shuttle. 10 wisps let me revisit a world I'd already been to. 50 let me cross with my physical body. Jun 100 let me choose which world to go to, instead of letting the gate pick. Jun 1000 let me carry an item home, and 10,000 bought something it wouldn't name. I looked at that list for a long time, at the words choose the target world, and I thought about a certain crack in a frozen north and a certain higher world that had torn me apart, and I started saving. I want to tell you the Black Prison family got off with a scare. It didn't. Because there was a thing about Jin Wuying, the family's untouchable head, that even I didn't know yet. The night my identity went public, our planetary governor, poor Gao Sheng, got a call from a vice president of the Dawn Society informing him that the 13th Peak Lord was a boy from his own backward little Kanglan star, and Gao Sheng fainted, and when he came to, he immediately started compiling a list of everyone who'd cyber-abused my family so he could personally destroy them, which I found touching. And across the region, Jin Wuming got dragged off by his father, Jin Wuying, and Jin Wuying received, through a hidden fluctuation in the dark, a set of orders from a Zerg master, because Jin Wuying was not human. He never had been. He came from a weak alien people caught in the crossfire of the human-Zerg war, and he'd defected to the Zerg and lurked inside human civilization for hundreds of thousands of years, and the Black Prison family was just the costume he wore. His parents were long dead, his clansmen were tools, and the orders were simple. Kill the 13th Peak Lord now, tonight, before the life mark finishes setting, while death can still be permanent. His son's public insult made the perfect cover for an audience, an apology visit, a father come to grovel. Jun Clan's secret technique could grant him 8th tier power for a moment, at the cost of burning his body and soul and lifespan to ash. Jun 10% chance to kill me, right under the Star-Lord's nose, and certain death for himself either way, and in exchange, his people would get 10 star systems and enough resources to rise. He accepted, because a doomed man likes his death to buy something. And he brought his son to the Crimson Hao main star and requested an audience and baited it with a priceless treasure to offer and waited for me to come out and meet him. I never came out, not out of cleverness, out of priorities. My senior brother had told me the life mark came before everything, before even paying respects to my teacher, and I was busy setting the anchor that would make me unkillable, and Jin Wuying, 10% chance and burning to spend it, could not get me to so much as glance his way. My family learned the truth from Governor Gao, refused to believe their 4th tier son was a 6th tier Peak Lord until a sealed imperial document made them, and I finished the life mark and then, in idle celebration, pushed the newly broadened martial Dao path as an update to the goddess, and she paid me 500,000 merit points and bumped my security clearance to 9 stars, and the path leapt from 53rd to 12th on the regional chart without even having a 6th tier chapter yet, and the whole plaza of scholars stared at a 5th tier path sitting among 7th and 8th tier paths like, in one man's words, an infant with a pacifier wandered into a room full of PhDs. I spent the 500,000 to become a 6th class citizen, which came with a bottle of 6th tier evolution potion and a seat at the once-a-century Star Alliance conference. I went to see my teacher and my 12 senior brothers, and when they asked whether I'd finally see Jin Wuying, who was still waiting down on the plaza with his apology and his treasure and his suicide technique, I thought about it for exactly 1 second and said, no, there's nothing to say. And my senior brother nodded, and with that single refusal, the Black Prison family was finished, its trade halted, its members confined, its assets frozen, a great old house pronounced dead by a boy who couldn't be bothered to look at it. And Jin Wuying, the alien assassin with 10% and a burning fuse, stood on the plaza with his 10% slowly ticking down to 0, and no one ever came. The 5th world was the one where I was born, rich, powerful, beloved, and completely worthless, and it's my favorite, so let me take my time. I woke up as Han Yan, and Han Yan had the best pedigree in the world and the worst luck in it. His grandfather was the sect master of the moral immortal sect, the 30th of that line, a refining void ancient saint who ranked among the 3 strongest in the sect's entire history, which is roughly the local equivalent of a 6th tier existence. His father, Han Xingyun, had a mutated heavenly spiritual root and was the top talent of his generation, a candidate to be the next sect master. His mother, Qin Fenghua, was the sect master's own daughter. His elder brother and second sister were both gifted prodigies, and Han Yan himself had no spiritual root at all, none. Which in a world where the spiritual root is the bridge to all cultivation meant he was, in the local phrase, a bamboo basket trying to hold water. You could pour a fortune of resources into him, and it would all just leak out and leave him immortal. His parents were heartbroken about it in the loving, useless way parents are. They'd even considered spending the 9 heavens glazed water on him, a treasure that could regrow a spiritual root, except it was the one and only material for the sect's ancient void pill, the pill that kept the sect from ever suffering a generation without an ancient saint, so it couldn't be spared for one rootless boy, however beloved. They cleared out an entire longevity paradise, the Yunwu Blessed Land, for him to live out a quiet mortal life in comfort. It was the saddest, kindest cage anyone ever built for me. They had no idea. Because a spiritual root is what you need to cultivate immortality, the local system, and I don't cultivate immortality. I cultivate martial Dao, which refines a person's own essence and blood, and needs no spiritual root at all, and works in any world where a body has blood in it. So while everyone wept over the rootless prince, I quietly swallowed blood key pills in my blessed land cage and shot up to the second tier of martial Dao, and then I hit it, because in this world, martial Dao counted as a heterodox demonic path, and a moral immortal sect disciple caught cultivating it would be crippled and caged no matter whose grandson he was. I built a secret technique out of soul power that would swallow any probing divine thought before it reached me, so that even the sect master couldn't scan me by accident, and I settled in to grow in the dark. I needed a cover story for the mountains of resources I'd be buying, so I picked the perfect one. I asked my brother, the sword cultivator Han Lei who slaughtered Song Kings on the Western Front, and my sister Han Manhwa, the thunder-rooted fairy, to bring me body cultivation manuals. Body cultivation needs no spiritual root, it's brutal and resource-hungry, and it only tempers the flesh, and it was exactly the disguise I needed. Jun rootless prince obsessed with the one path open to him, burning fortunes to force his stubborn body forward. Everyone found it noble and a little sad, and no one questioned the resources, and the body cultivation also happened to mask the aura of my real work. 20 years I played that part. In public, I became a prodigy body cultivator, climbing from golden core to soul transformation, synthesized from 73 of the world's best body arts. In private, my martial Dao reached the peak of the 5th order, and my soul began its transformation toward the 6th. Then I started spreading my Dao, because that was the whole point, the colony strategy. Plant the martial Dao here so it outlives me. And I couldn't do it under the immortal sect's nose, so I picked the EC, a lawless scatter of 800 minor sects and 3,000 unorthodox paths, a place so full of exiles and weirdos that one more strange new art wouldn't stand out. I sent my Shen God there, my solar nascent soul, a clone that shared my mind and carried near ancient saint strength to build the first martial Dao faction. And between my main body in the blessed land, my Shen God in the East Sea, and my gang God I kept in reserve, I had my usual triple insurance. Kill any one of the 3 and the other 2 rebuild him. I am very hard to make stay dead. Meanwhile, my grandfather, the sect master, broke through to the void tempering stage, deeper into the refining void realm than almost any ancient saint ever gets, and the sect threw a celebration, and my brother and sister came to collect their rootless little brother for it. I dialed my shown strength all the way down to a mere golden core body cultivator, a concealment so far beneath my real level that nothing in this world could see through it, picked out a gift, and went to stand in front of the grandfather who could kill continents. I left my gang god hidden in the blessed land's treasury on the way out as a second resurrection anchor, because I don't walk into a refining void ancient saint's house without a spare life in my pocket. The celebration was court politics at its finest. My mother, Qin Fenghua, radiant. My father, Han Qingyun, the outsider who'd married in, quietly bullied by his rival for the throne, a Liu family man named Qin Chengfeng, who took one look at me and sneered at the rootless trash and his cute little body cultivation. My grandfather, the sect master Qin Haoran, presiding, and the rule of the whole place hanging in the air. Whoever reaches refining void first becomes the next sect master, Han Qingyun or Qin Chengfeng, the outsider or the family man. And while I sat there being sneered at, on the far side of the continent, my Sheng god burned down the Black Veil Islands. The Black Veil Islands were Qin Chengfeng's secret East Sea power base, 12 soul transformation heavenly lords and 56 nascent soul true monarchs, the hidden engine of his ambitions, and my Sheng god arrived over them, gathered a miniature sun in one hand, and dropped it. The technique was 10,000 suns in the same sky, and I want you to savor where I got it. I copied it off the Liang Saint Child, my rematch punching bag from back home, the star-forged monster I'd slapped to pieces in 2 hits. His own signature killing art, comprehended, carried across a universe, and used to incinerate the secret base of the man sneering at me at my grandfather's party. I devoured every resource those islands had hoarded, and I did it for 2 reasons: to avenge my bullied father, and to clear the ground where my martial Dao was going to grow. My grandfather felt it happen and fired the Taihao Immortal Mirror. The Taihao Immortal Mirror is the sect's one great treasure, a sect-protecting artifact whose light can cross the entire Central Earth continent in seconds. The reason the Immortal Sect had crushed the 3 rival ancient saints of North and South and West in a decisive battle 120,000 years ago. Its light lanced across the world to the East Sea, and my Sheng god vanished a half-step ahead of it. The sect replayed a hazy image of the mysterious fire expert and mobilized to hunt him, and my mother, worried, warned my brother and sister to flee on sight if they ever met this dangerous stranger, and then she patted my head and praised her sweet, well-behaved Yan, who never left home and never caused any trouble. I have rarely enjoyed a sentence more. The 2 rival powers of this world took notice too. The blood demon lord in the north, a blood-robed ancient saint who'd fused himself with a sea of blood and couldn't die as long as it didn't dry, and the emaciated man who ruled the Nether Ghost Palace in the south both saw a fire expert openly at war with the immortal sect, and each sent an agent to court him. The enemy of my enemy, they reasoned, is a friend worth keeping. They had no idea they were courting the rootless grandson of the sect master himself. I finished recovering to the 6th tier, this world's refining void ancient saint level, and set myself 2 real projects. Pioneer the 6th tier volume of my martial Tao, and push my body cultivation to the void refining level, which no one in this world's 100,000 years of history had ever reached, because I deduced that a void refining body cultivator would finally birth one of the legendary physical body divine abilities, and I wanted to see one. And then White Jade Island rose, and I planted my flag. White Jade Island was a cultivation holy land the size of several planets that sank to the deep sea floor every 2,000 years and rose again ripe with matured spirit medicine, and when it surfaced, dozens of the East Sea's heavenly lords gathered to carve it up, the strongest of them, White Bone. Heavenly Lord, a half-step ancient saint, was bullying the rest for half the core when my Sheng God walked out of the island he'd already quietly claimed and said, to the whole crowd of heavenly lords, I am the master of White Jade Island, is it so or not? One wave of pressure, and White Bone Heavenly Lord and every Heavenly Lord present dropped to their knees and then fled like mice. I named that Sheng God Hongyu, and I founded the White Jade Pavilion, and I opened it to disciples, pass a test and cultivate on the Holy Island, and the only price of admission was giving up your old art and switching to martial Tao. The colony was planted. The immortal sect convened about the half-step ancient saint calling himself Hong Yu, and my grandfather made the correct, cautious decision, which was to leave him alone, because chasing one upstart into the vast East Sea meant leaving moral Immortal Mountain undefended against 3 rival ancient saints, and it wasn't worth it, so they waited. And in 10 years, the White Jade Pavilion swelled past 100,000 martial Tao cultivators, run by a sharp disciple named Zhou Yue, and the martial Tao's beginner chapter leaked off the island and into Central Earth and the Blood Demon Sea and the Ghost Domain, until the Tao was rooted widely enough that it would survive even if the island itself were destroyed, which was always the point. Then I went to become the first void-refining body cultivator in 100,000 years, and I picked the spot carefully, the western buffer zone at the edge of the Demon Saint Nest, my father's patrol territory, a blind spot for the Taihao mirror because a brand new breakthrough is loud and I couldn't hide it under the mirror's gaze. I slipped out of the blessed land for only the 2nd time ever, left an aura decoy to fool the maids, and posted my 2 gods as guards, and I broke through, and the instant I did, the mountain hunting me showed up. The first prince of the Demon Saint Nest, a 1,000-jang giant ape, 3,000 meters of it, a monster that woke 10 years a century and could erupt to true ancient saint power, came stomping toward the fresh spirit key of my breakthrough, saw a dust-sized human standing in its path, and raised one continent-cracking foot to squash me. The watching demon kings looked at me the way you look at roadkill that hasn't happened yet. I kicked it into the ground. The mountain-sized ape staggered. I kicked it again, and it went face first into the earth, and again, and its bones cracked, and then, because I just spent everything on the breakthrough and needed the fuel, I opened my mouth and inhaled it dry. The whole 3,000-meter first prince, reduced to the equivalent of dozens of 6-tier spirit herbs, poured into my recovery. The demon kings watching had a collective religious experience. Which ancient saint, they whispered, is that? The world's 2nd strongest monster, one shot and eaten by the rootless trash Han Yan, and not one soul in that world connected the two. The demon saint itself woke, soul searched the witnesses, and found that a body cultivator had killed and eaten its heir, 5,000 years from becoming a 2nd song saint, and it howled and blamed the immortal sect. My grandfather came by mirror light, traced the scene back as far as an ancient saint's methods will let you, and deduced that a body refinement ancient saint now existed in the world, an unprecedented wildcard, friend or foe, unknown, and the whole 4-power balance of the world shivered, and the fresh physical body divine ability I'd been chasing finally took shape in my blood. Rebirth from a drop of blood. As long as a single drop of my blood survived anywhere, I would regenerate, whole, from that drop. I comprehended not just Han Yan's version of it, but its underlying essence, so I could wield it in any world, in any body, forever. Another permanent cheat, filed with the rest. And that was when the trap that would break this world open finally armed itself, and it armed itself against my family. My grandfather, spooked by the dead first prince and the wildcard ancient saint, decided the sect needed a second ancient saint immediately, and he had resources to push only one candidate to the top. He chose Qin Cheng Feng, his own Liu family blood, over my more talented outsider father. And to keep my father from resenting the snub, he transferred the whole family, my father, my mother, his own daughter, my brother, my sister, 4 of them, and pointedly not the harmless rootless Yan, out to a remote nothing place called Manhwa Mountain, meaning to recall them and win their loyalty back later. Cold, tidy politics. Blame yourself, he thought at my father, for not being born a Liu. But Qin Cheng Feng's people saw the opening. The transfer order named only the family of 4, unescorted, on the road, and a family of 4 dead on the road would leave Qin Cheng Feng the only heir to the throne. So they proposed murdering my parents and siblings en route, using a refining void talisman left behind by a long-dead sect master whose aura the Taihao mirror wouldn't flag as a foreign threat. Qin Cheng Feng hesitated because the sect master would trace it back, and then he did the math on 3,000 more years of his grandfather's rule and a clear road to the throne, and he agreed, coldly, to kill them all. At the Blessed Land, my family said goodbye to their harmless, rootless Yan, and I looked at my overconfident father, and I told them, plainly, the danger on this road isn't the enemies outside, it's the ones inside. Watch Qin Cheng Feng, the kind of man who repays the smallest slight. My father laughed and waved it off. The immortal mirror covers all of Central Earth. What could touch us here? And they rode out toward a road with a killing talisman waiting on it. They didn't know their harmless little brother had heard every word of the plot from 3 provinces away, and they didn't know that harmless little brother had already sent a god down the road ahead of them. On the Manhwa road, the assassins had the refining void talisman out and ready, waiting for my family's jade chariot to come into range, and my gang god sensed them from tens of thousands of li away and simply reached out and set the talisman off in their hands. It detonated early, wasted, and then a figure merged with the moon itself loomed down over a valley full of soul transformation killers whose legs had gone to water. The talisman even managed to wall my god off for a single heartbeat, which I noted with genuine respect, because immortal Dao talisman craft is a real art. Then the moon figure pressed down and the assassins stopped being a problem. My family, thousands of li up the road, felt 2 ancient saint auras collide behind them, and my father, Han Qingyun, who is not a fool, read the whole thing off the aftertaste in the air. Ambushers. Jun Liu family refining void talisman, the 21st sect master's own, which meant Qin Cheng Feng had just tried to wipe out his bloodline on the road, and some mysterious Taiyin ancient saint, he guessed the Ghost King, had saved them for reasons of his own. He understood standing there that the sect master had chosen Qin Cheng Feng and thrown him away. What he never understood, not for 100 more years, was that the Taiyin ancient saint who saved his life was his harmless, rootless son. My grandfather came to investigate by mirror light and found my gang god standing over the wreck of his family's own assassination attempt. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Not important," I told him, in my god's voice. "Your sect's little power struggles are just funny to watch." We fought up into the 9 heavens, and the whole world felt it. The Blood Demon Lord and the Demon Saint and the Ghost King all baffled by a pure Taiyin ancient saint who very clearly wasn't the Ghost King. And when my grandfather moved to bring his true body and the full mirror to bear and end it, my gang god knocked him back with one strike and dissolved into wisps of moonlight and was gone. He was left hanging in the 9 heavens, the ruler of the world, humiliated by a stranger, wondering if maybe it had just been a fluke. I learned something from that fight worth more than the win. The Taihao immortal mirror wasn't a refining void treasure at all. It was a Dao integration artifact from a level above this whole world's ceiling, and it came from a place called the Spirit Realm, which the sect's sect masters ascended to through a thing called the Ascension Platform after 10 or 20,000 years of rule. Another door up, another higher world sitting on top of this one. I filed it with all the others and told myself the same thing I always do. Become invincible first, unlock the secrets after. My grandfather back home dressed Qin Cheng Feng down, and here's the part that tells you exactly what kind of world I was in. He wasn't angry that Qin Cheng Feng had tried to murder my father. He was annoyed that Qin Cheng Feng had done it too early, too impatiently, wasting a live asset that was worth more breathing. At the height of ancient sainthood, he explained to his protege, "Your rivals are just pawns, and killing a useful pawn is a beginner's mistake." Then he confirmed that yes, Qin Cheng Feng was the chosen heir. That's what the whole transfer had been about. And Qin Cheng Feng swore joyfully never to touch my father's line again, and dismissed the pitiful, harmless Han Yan as beneath any notice at all, and vowed the little blessed land could stay his forever. And my grandfather took his heir off to see the greatest secret of the moral immortal sect, which I'd already half guessed was the Ascension Platform. 100 years passed. My family languished at Manhwa Mountain, taking comfort that harmless Yan at least was safe in his longevity paradise. The 3 rival ancient saints quietly reallied and dreamed of recruiting the 2 mystery ancient saints who'd appeared and vanished. and I spent the century fully comprehending rebirth from a drop of blood down to its usable essence, and reaching for the 7th tier of martial Dao, while the local wall held me at the peak of the 6th. The Blood Demon Lord made a move that I have to tell you about because it's the funniest thing that happened in that world. He wanted to invade Central Earth, and for that he needed the sect's formation map, and the one accessible man who knew it was my abandoned, presumed resentful father. Too risky to approach my father directly, so he sent a blood figure agent to court the low-profile harmless son first, Han Yan, armed with a crystal that could briefly slip the Taihao mirror's gaze, under strict orders to use only threats or bribes, never force. The agent slithered into my blessed land and announced ominously, "I know your big secret." And I want you to understand my honest reaction, which was confusion, because I had a great many secrets. Was it the Black Veil Islands I'd incinerated? The body refinement ancient saint I'd become? The first prince I'd eaten? The night in the 9 heavens I'd beaten the sect master and his artifact? The small matter of my being the lord of Hongyu Island? I genuinely didn't know which world-shaking secret this blood figure had uncovered, so I asked, which one? The blood figure, throne, leaned in and revealed triumphantly that I was secretly a hidden nascent soul body cultivator. It had deduced this from a purchase of ancient Tibetan flowers 20 years back. That was it. That was the leverage. The great blackmail lever, aimed at the single most over-secreted man in the world, was that his body cultivation was a stage higher than advertised. I nearly felt bad for it. It dangled immortality at me, offered to make me a blood divine son, and having thus confirmed that the blood demon sea knew absolutely nothing real, I collapsed every trump it carried and its mirror-slipping crystal all at once, and it died in the space of a breath with the dawning understanding that harmless Han Yan was at least an ancient saint. I read its memory on the way out and learned the whole invasion scheme for free. The universe kept handing me things. Meanwhile, my martial Dao reached the 6th rank's 11th stage, past the local void refining limit, brushing Dao integration, and I stood in front of the brutal wall between the 6th rank and the 7th and understood how brutal it was, because in my whole home star region of 1.2 million planets, there were fewer than 100 7th tier evolvers, each of them an instant general or king. And back at the sect, Qin Chengfeng finally broke through to refining void and became an ancient saint, which meant the mountain was anchored by a second saint at last, which meant my grandfather was finally free to take the Taihao mirror out and go reimpose the sect's terror on the world. He picked the East Sea first. He picked Hongyu, because the 3 rival ancient saints all had trump cards he could only suppress, but Hongyu was, he thought, a mere half-step saint, the one rival he could actually kill. So Qin Haoran, true body and full mirror, hung himself in the 9 heavens over White Jade Island, my martial Dao holy land, 2 million miles of it now, hundreds of thousands of my disciples and mortals living on it, and he fired a mirror beam meant to erase the whole thing from existence. And my Sheng God stepped in front of it and caught it with one hand. He swelled to myriad Jiang, a second sun burning at his back, and the world-ending beam of a Dao integration artifact wore itself out to nothing against the back of his palm. And White Jade Island wasn't so much as scratched. My grandfather stared. The 3 rival ancient saints across the world reeled, because in a single instant every assumption anyone had made about Hongyu shattered. He was never a half-step saint. He surpassed the refining void ceiling. He touched Dao integration. He must, they whispered, be some monster left over from 100,000 years ago, from before the Ascension platform, one of the old ones who'd walked past the world's limits. My grandfather, unable to win and unable to suppress and terrified above all that Hongyu would ally with his 3 enemies, sheathed the mirror and quietly sent Hongyu a message. Let's not be enemies, let's talk. Pick a neutral place. And of all the places in the world, the neutral ground he chose because it was low value and defenseless and close to home and would prove he meant no trap, was the Yunwu blessed land, my blessed land. He descended into my longevity paradise, told the maids not to disturb young Master Yan in his seclusion, and sat down at the cloud mist pavilion to wait for the mysterious lord of Hongyu Island. And Han Yan walked up the mountain path and sat down in the seat reserved for the ancient saint across from his own grandfather and said, "Grandfather, what is it you want to cooperate with me on?" I'd sent my Taiyin god ahead first, wearing my real face, down to Mangya Mountain, where it froze the true monarchs guarding my exiled family, told my startled mother, "I'm taking you all somewhere safer," and folded my father and mother and brother and sister into its sleeve with a heaven-grade art, because I expected this conversation to end in violence and I wanted my family off the board before it did. So they were safe in my sleeve when the line landed, the line only Hongyu could have known, and I watched my grandfather's whole world come apart across his face. He scanned me 100 ways in a heartbeat. Every probe bounced off an ocean of blood key and rolling red cloud where his harmless grandson's meridians should have been. And I said it plainly because I was done hiding, because nothing in that world could threaten me anymore. I am Han Yan, and I am also the Lord of Hongyu Island. He connected it all in a rush. Hongyu first struck the Black Veil Islands the very hour Yan stood at his void tempering ceremony. The body refinement ancient saint, the Taiyan stranger. All of it, one person, the invisible crippled grandson he'd never once looked at twice. And to his credit, he adjusted fast, the way you have to when you've lived long enough. He made his offer. Ally with me, he said, and we'll wipe out the Nether Palace and the Blood Demon Sea together. Fine, I said. I've got no love for them either. And I named my 3 conditions. First, the complete moral immortal scripture, the sect's Tao integration tier foundational art that only sect masters may cultivate. Granted, he said. Second, everything about the ascension platform and the spirit realm. Granted, he said. I'd have told you anyway. And third, I said, I want to spread the martial Tao freely across Central Earth. No suppression. And there he stopped, because that was the one thing he couldn't give. Immortal Tao wasn't just what the sect did. It was what the sect was, the way an imperial bloodline is what an empire is. Letting a rival Tao grow on Central Earth was drawing the firewood from under the cauldron, changing the dynasty. He would rather, he said, and offered instead to simply make me the next sect master, to fold me and my monstrous talent into the sect entirely. Then forget it, I said. Because that was the whole thing, wasn't it? That had always been the whole thing, across every world. I will not be absorbed. I want my own Tao, free. He struck first. He bet that the Hongyu who'd blocked his mirror was a clone, and that this Han Yan body in front of him held only a fraction of the power. He bet wrong. The blood key ocean of a body refinement saint and a martial Tao master erupted out of the harmless grandson and swallowed the sect master and his Tao integration artifact whole, fist prints denting a treasure that was supposed to be beyond damage, and the whole of Central Earth looked up and watched the rootless spiritual-less trash Han Yan beat the ruler of the world backward across the sky. The 3 rival ancient saints, whose every dark and evil path was hard countered by masculine blood key, panicked, and the Ghost King fled for the far south. My grandfather retreated to Moral Immortal Mountain, and I followed, and I submerged the sacred mountain in a crimson ocean of blood key, and started collapsing its 100,000-year formations one by one, while Qin Cheng Feng, the freshly minted ancient saint who dismissed me as beneath notice, trembled and understood at last exactly who the grandson he'd never bothered to see actually was. I couldn't break the mountain. My full 3-fold strike, True Body and Gang God and Sheng God, fused into near 7th tier Taiji, hammered it, and it held, because the mountain was welded into the ley lines of the entire continent, and to break it, I'd have had to grind all of Central Earth to dust, and Central Earth was the soil my martial Tao needed to grow in, so I stopped. I'd never come to raise the sect. I'd come to measure myself against the strongest thing in the world, and to make a point. And the point was made, watched by the whole continent, and I withdrew. My grandfather sat in his half-collapsed hall and quietly wondered whether choosing Qin Cheng Feng over my father had doomed them all. I brought my family to White Jade Island and told them the truth at last, that Hongyu and the Taiyan saint were both me, and my father, bless him, supplied the cover story himself, that Yan must be the reincarnation of some ancient master from before the Ascension platform, 9 parts true and 1 part comfortable fiction, and I explained my real reasons for beating the sect, which were 2. To avenge their exile, and to force out the thing standing behind the sect, the spirit realm ancestors, so I could bargain with them directly for my Tao's survival after I left. And then the 3 rival ancient saints came, one by one, the Blood Demon Lord and the Demon Saint and the Ghost King, and each of them handed me their core Tao integration secret arts, the Blood Sea Undying Law and the rest, and begged only that I not destroy them, and I accepted every gift with a smile and farmed every technique, and the gods who terrorized a world for 100,000 years became my tribute payers. 100 more years, and the White Jade Pavilion exploded to 16 million first-rank disciples, nearly 9 million second-rank, 100,000 third, over 2,000 fourth, and 24 fifth-rank martial Tao cultivators, and every one of them could climb only because I'd reworked the path to accept any attribute a person could feel. The rework I'd made for one frustrated student had become the foundation of a whole civilization's worth of cultivators. I sealed the deep sea eye beneath White Jade Island so it would never sink again, making it the permanent ancestral home of my Tao, the deep sea behemoths fleeing a mere wisp of my aura, the same move I'd made on the North Sea Eye a world ago, re-engineering a world to fit my Tao. Then I walked into the sealed, terrified Moral Immortal Mountain like it was my own back garden, because 100 years of comprehending its formations had made me their master, and I left my Gang God and Sheng God and a single drop of essence blood outside as my 3rd and 4th spare lives, and I found Qin Cheng Feng in the top hall still scheming, even now, to shield the Ascension platform from me, and I killed him with a single word. Shut up. His light just went out. He'd had one job, which was to keep his head down after trying to murder my family, and he couldn't manage even that. And I had a fully cooperative sect master take me to the ascension platform. It was a stone gateway half a meter tall, a stable passage up to the spirit realm where the sect's Tao integration ancestors lived, and the instant I looked at it, the Gate of Myriad Realms in my mind reached out on its own and copied the spirit realm's coordinates. Jun's 6th mark, glowing into place beside the 5 worlds I'd already traveled, which meant that from home, someday, for 10 wisps of boundary-breaking source power, I could shuttle up into a world above my own. The cheat had learned to aim upward. Then I had the sect master summon his ancestors down. Jun Taoist projection condensed over the platform, tethered, unable to leave it without collapsing, a wisp of a Tao integration true immortal, named Xuankong Immortal, the oldest and strongest of the sect's spirit realm ancestors. They'd all concluded I must be some ancient master reincarnated. Zhuangji scanned me for the telltale friction of a possessed body, the seam where an old soul meets a new flesh, and found none, and understood what I actually was. Jun's self-made prodigy who had built an entire rival Tao alone, from nothing, in a lower realm, an immortal king seed. Something that, if it reached the spirit realm, would tower over everything. So he didn't fight me, he invested in me. He granted the martial Tao the right to spread, and he sealed it with a Tao oath sworn under the spirit realm's own world consciousness, unbreakable even by an immortal king. The price he named was almost nothing. Help the immortal sect once, when you ascend, within your capability, a condition so soft it was really just a request to remember them fondly. And he threw in 2 gifts I hadn't even asked for, the right for my 6th rank cultivators to ascend the platform themselves someday, and the arrangement that my own bloodline would supply the sect's future sect masters. To his baffled descendant Qin Haoran, he explained the logic plainly. Court the future immortal king now, while he still deigns to come to you with requests, because in 10,000 years you won't be able to beg an audience. And with that, my brother Han Lei was named the next sect master, and the whole reason I'd torn that world open, a home for my Tao that would outlive me, was won, not by force in the end, by treaty. I borrowed the moral immortal scripture and comprehended the Tao integration essence out of it, and it opened new directions for my 7th tier, but still not the one I wanted, so I forced the breakthrough anyway, because a shuttle body means a wrong path costs me nothing. The world itself tried to stop me, because it suppresses the leap from 6th to 7th, which is why no lower realm had ever birthed a Tao integration immortal. They always had to ascend first. I beat the suppression by cultivating my true body and both my gods each to the very lip of the 7th tier, and then fusing all 3 at once, quantity crashing over into quality, forcing the door. First lower realm Tao integration ascender in the history of the world. Up in the spirit realm, a fiery-tempered ancestor named Yantian felt it happen and refused to believe it, and started to wonder if old Xuanji had actually underrated me. But the 7th tier I'd forced was immortal Tao-flavored, shaped by that borrowed scripture, and it wasn't mine, so I let it go, because I could. And I tore open the void turbulence outside the world, which only a Tao integration immortal can survive, and I felt the true spirit realm hanging above, and I chose not to go, not through the platform, and not through the void, because a soul search in a realm full of immortal kings could expose my real home, the main world, and I don't gamble my whole existence to satisfy curiosity. I paid my last visit to my family on White Jade Island, and I gave my parents and my sister the resources to break through to refining void and ascend the platform themselves one day, since my brother was already set to be sect master, and I said a quiet goodbye, and my mother, who could feel these things, understood she wouldn't see her Yan much anymore. I'm ascending, I told her, and let her think I meant up when I meant home. And I spent my last 40 years adrift in the destroying dark outside the world, in the void turbulence, comprehending space rules, the wild, murderous far side of space against the calm, ordered space inside a world. And it was the single greatest harvest of the whole trip, and exactly the key to the 7th tier I actually wanted. Then the gate lit, and the 5th world let me go. 500 years there, under 4 months here. I came home to the Crimson How main star sitting at the 6th tier's peak with a whole 7th order path already scouted, and I'd left a spare body hidden in that immortal world as a re-entry anchor, 10 wisps of source power to go back and step straight into full power if I ever needed to. I would not be ascending to the real spirit realm anytime soon, coordinates or no coordinates, because a realm full of immortal kings is a realm where one soul search could leak the location of my true home to the whole hostile universe. And staying away also kept the sect's ancestors nervously wondering whether I might pop out of the sky at any moment, which quietly protected my Tao better than any oath. I uploaded my 6th rank chapter to the goddess, and she paid me 400,000 merit points and put my path at 60% for the 7th tier and 20 for the 8th, and it leapt to 6th on the whole star region's chart, where the top 3 slots belong to the only 3 grand scholars the region has produced in its entire history. I declined to upload the immortal Tao I'd learned, by the way, even though it was worth a fortune, because it belonged to whatever ancient thing had created it, and spreading it would have been doing that thing's work for free, and my whole endgame runs on spreading my own path, not somebody else's. Promotion to 7th class citizen would cost 2 million merit points, an astronomical wall I wouldn't touch until my path opened its 7th order chapter, so I set it aside. 2 pieces of mail were waiting. The Liaoyang Saint Child, now 6th tier, wanted a rematch, and I declined, because the gap between us had gone from a gap to a chasm, and there was nothing left in him for me to farm. Keep that in your pocket. And the Black Prison family got the ending it earned. My second senior brother had gone to investigate them, routine harassment of the clan that insulted a peak lord, and found something far worse than arrogance. Jin Wuying, the untouchable clan head, the alien who'd waited hundreds of thousands of years for a 10% shot at me and never gotten to take it, had been colluding with the Zerg all along. My senior brother took him under the Star-Lord's own watchful eye, and an 8th Order soul specialist built an illusory world inside his mind and walked his entire life through it, and the truth came out, and that was the end. Insulting a peak lord earns a family a decline. Betraying humanity to the Zerg earns it annihilation. The assassin who never got to fire his shot was undone by the very nature he'd hidden for 100,000 years, and I didn't have to lift a finger. I went to see my teacher about a cultivation problem, and I want to tell you about it because it's the most fun I've had at anyone's expense in a while. There's a set of 965 space models, the accepted map of the surface of space rules, and comprehending all of them is roughly what it takes to enter the rules at all, and it's 7th tier work, king level 7th tier work. I'd comprehended 800 plus of them in under half a year at the 6th tier, and I went to my teacher, the Red House Star-Lord, a creature born attuned to space, stuck on the 876th, and asked for a hint. He stared at me. He demonstrated the model once. I understood it instantly. And then I asked him sheepishly if he'd mind demonstrating the remaining 100 or so, and the deeper 7,000 after those. And my teacher, this ancient 6th tier and beyond being, spent half a day as a silent demonstration machine for his own disciple, and afterwards sat alone with the specific hollowed-out feeling of a master who has just realized he is about to be overtaken by the student, thinking, with real dismay, am I next? He recommended I farm space rules on the alien race battlefield, where the permanent space cracks torn by supreme powerhouse duels make the rules easy to read, and he told me firmly to send a clone and never my true body, because a genius's real body on the battlefield is a carnival for every alien race that can reach it. So I refilled my strength on Scarlet Spirit Liquid, felt my second physical body divine ability starting to gestate, and, while it did, recorded a dozen martial Dao teaching videos under my anonymous founder's name and posted them to my 10 billion followers, and the whole civilization erupted because the man who built the #1 path had just started explaining it for free, and cultivators corrected their detours and switched their paths and threw me rewards, and every new student was another root of the Dao I'd need for the ultimate leap. My second divine ability finished taking shape while I did it. Mountain Moving, a pure force rule ability that multiplied my strikes many times over, and better, whose inner runes let me master the force rule itself in a single moment instead of the 10 days it should have taken. 2 divine abilities now, Rebirth and Mountain Moving, Space and Force. The stack kept growing. Then I sent my Shen God to the battlefield, a small one against a race called the Black Abyss, chosen for its permanent space crack, and the moment my God arrived, the universe did the thing it always does around me, which is hand me an obscene amount of luck disguised as danger. Jun's squad of Black Abyss experts had found a hidden cache and, rather than risk it themselves, decided to capture the incoming human and force him to loot it. They blew up my God's ship, surrounded him, and offered him his life if he obeyed. I played dumb, let them close in, and then unfolded 10,000 miles of Taiyang true fire and incinerated the whole squad, captain and all, into pure essence poured into my solar nascent soul. And the cache they died over turned out to be the tomb space of a dead 8th Order evolver named Fan Gang, a lone wanderer killed on that very battlefield over 1 million years ago, whose lingering will handed everything he owned to the first human to walk in. 8th Order defensive armor, Jun damaged but priceless 8th Order soul defense treasure. Jun 1,000 cubic meters of cosmic crystal, the hardest currency in the universe, worth on the order of a quadrillion of my civilization's coins, and a vial of bloodline essence that could found an entire evolver family. The asset-poor Peak Lord was suddenly, absurdly rich, and as his will dissolved, the dead man murmured 2 words that weren't for me, an address, a place he'd never made it home to. Looking Moon Star region, Tianqian Star. And then he was gone. And I kept the words, because a dead man's last address is the kind of thing that turns out to matter. Back home, I kept trading messages with Wen Han, the Grand Scholar, and he asked me which stage of cultivation mattered most, and I said the 7th, and he got ready to smugly correct me. The 8th, obviously. The 8th is where you learn world creation, where you open an inner world inside yourself, the foundation everything above rests on. And then he read the reply I sent him, and it was a method for opening an inner world at the 7th order instead of the 8th, built from space and Taiji, a thing that shouldn't be possible, and he spent an hour verifying it couldn't work and came out the other side white-faced with the discovery that it could. Which evolutionary Grand Scholar, he demanded, are you actually? I'm not a Grand Scholar, I told him, and left him sitting on his research planet feeling, for the first time in his gilded life, old. Out at the space crack, my Sheng God comprehended model after model of the rules, and the Gate of Myriad Realms in my mind did something it had never done. It sped up. The boundary-breaking source power it gathered, fixed for my whole life at one wisp every 333 days, ticked up to 310, then to 298 at the sweet spot beside the crack because it turned out that permanent wounds in a world's fabric feed the gate. Jun's second source of the fuel my whole existence runs on. And this crack was 10 meters wide. The medium battlefields have cracks tens of thousands of miles wide, the large ones cracks you measure in light years. I sat there doing the arithmetic on what a light-year-wide wound in reality would do to the gate's appetite, and I understood that the most dangerous place in the universe, the meat grinder where an 8th order evolver had died over a scrap, was, for me specifically, a treasure land. I finished the last of the 965 space models, and the perfect 7th order chapter of my martial Dao unfolded like water finding its channel, and I broke through. The 7th tier, Dao integration, back home, real this time, my own path, not a borrowed one, and in my Dantian a Taiji small world condensed, an actual inner world, sun and moon and space woven into 10 miles of black and white ground, a feat that isn't supposed to happen until the leap from 7th to 8th. It came out of the breakthrough starving, and I fed it scarlet spirit liquid until it filled, and when it steadied, I could feel world power radiating out of it, the exclusive weapon of 8th tier evolvers, running through a 7th tier body, which is a bit like cheating. Jun Casual Strike now shattered a planet 10 million kilometers off without my even reaching for a rule. Only a 7th tier king should have been my equal, and I'd only just walked in the door. My teacher had seen it coming. He'd gathered my 12 senior brothers on the pretext of a space lesson, and quietly let them watch me break through. And when the aura of it rolled across the region, the whole thing went the way these things always go now. Under 30 years old. 6th tier to 7th in under 2 years, a thing that in the whole recorded history of the Star Alliance had essentially never happened, and the statistics my senior brothers muttered to each other said that of the handful who ever pull it off, 70% go on to the 8th tier, which meant that barring an accident, I was already, on paper, a near certain future 8th order evolver, and my 9 6th tier senior brothers, who'd been calling me little junior brother for 2 years, stood there working out whether they now had to call me senior. My teacher laid out the 3 walls left before the 8th tier, open an inner world, which I'd already done. Possess spiritual will strong enough to survive the heart demon tribulation, the one thing no treasure can buy, the one thing that only comes from living long and losing things, and a 3rd wall he wouldn't name yet. I thought about 6 lifetimes and 300 years and every grave I'd stood at across every world, and I thought quietly that maybe the shuttles had been tempering something in me the whole time that wasn't power. The region announced that the 13th Peak Lord had reached the 7th tier, and the reaction I enjoyed most came from the dark. Several alien intelligences, the ethnic heads of races in the Zerg Grand Alliance, felt the news and came apart. They'd been told this 13th Peak Lord was only slightly above average 2 years ago. And now he was 7th tier, and he never left the fortified heart of the Crimson How main star, and cursing him to death would just get him resurrected by a supreme powerhouse who wouldn't want to lose so rare a genius, and there was no way to reach him, and no way to stop him, and one of them said the quiet thing out loud, we should have strangled him in the cradle. Now, in a few thousand years, on some battlefield, they were going to face a second Red House Starlord, a thing that devoured 8th Order aliens whole, and they were going to lose clansmen to him by the world. There was nothing they could do. There had never, from the very first, been anything they could do. The Liaoyang Saint Child heard the news too, and assumed the black-haired old man reading it to him had misspoken, because surely it was some other Peak Lord, not the one he'd been demanding a rematch from. It was that one. And the Liaoyang Saint Child sat very still and understood at last that I'd been declining his challenges not out of fear, but out of mercy, because accepting would have been bullying, and then he asked his servant to fetch him a fire crystal, and went to go cultivate inside the heart of a star in endless pain, at real risk of burning to ash, so that in 5 or 10 years he could climb to the 7th tier and challenge me again. I want you to appreciate the specific magnificent stupidity of that. I will slap him to pieces again, and he will go back into the star. Some people you just have to respect. And then, right at the end, a small, quiet moment that tells you everything. My assistant informed me that the Star Alliance conference was convening, the once-a-century gathering where the fate of hundreds of star domains gets decided, and that as a sixth-class citizen, I now qualified to attend, to vote, to sit near the levers of real galactic power. I thought about it for a moment. All that reach, all that politics. Forget it, I said. No matter how important that conference is, it means very little to me. I'd rather spend the time comprehending the rules and refining the 7th order chapter of my path, because here's where I actually was. I started this as a name on a conscription list, an ordinary man with a body that couldn't hold a spark, whose whole family's happiness was quietly built on selling him to a war meant to kill him. And I ended it a 7th-tier peak lord that entire alien empires lie awake regretting they didn't murder in his crib, sitting at the fortified heart of the greatest civilization in the universe, waving off a seat at the galaxy's high table because it would cut into my study time. That's the whole distance, start to finish, and I walked every step of it inside other people's cradles. I don't owe anyone anything now. Everyone owes me. But the universe has finally, properly noticed me, which means the easy part is over, and somewhere on a battlefield a light-year-wide wound in reality is waiting to feed my gate, and somewhere out past the Looking Moon Star region there's a planet called Tianchen that a dead man wanted to get home to, and somewhere far above all of it there's a spirit realm full of immortal kings who've been told an immortal king seed is coming. I've got a lot of doors left to open, and every single one of them opens the same way. Ask me who's on the other side. I don't know yet. That's the fun part.